and we are getting ready to start the IRC tag. I appreciate everybody's time early on a Monday morning. So if you will, I will ask Stoyan or Annette, whichever one, if we could do a roll call to see who's here and make sure we have a quorum, please.
Micah,
I am here.
Jennifer, Quintai, Ron?
Here.
Ron? Okay,
Here.
welcome. Todd, Short,
I'm here.
welcome. Michelle? Michelle? Okay. Did I hear something? Annie?
Present.
Let's see. Darren?
I'm here.
And okay. Darren Graham, I'm sorry if I'm screwing up the names. And the last one, insurance realtor appraiser, Darren Watkins. Okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 TAC members present. We have a quorum. We can continue.
Thank you, Stoyan. All right. Welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Micah Chappelle. I am the Technical Code Residential Technical Advisory Group Chair. Too many groups that I'm involved with. But again, I appreciate everybody's time. It looks like if you've not been able to look at the agenda, that the code change proposals we're reviewing today is on an updated sheet at the link. Also, we need to move to item 2. Take that back. Item 1. Is there any folks besides the council member tag members that would like to be recognized and introduce themselves? Feel free, please.
Ed Kurtz. I'm here as a citizen. I have a revised proposal about EV charging that's on the agenda.
Hi, this is Kinley Deller with King County Solid Waste, and I have a proposed appendix that we'll be talking about later today.
This is Sherry Newbold, and I have a revised proposal that I have submitted to talk about.
Ardell Jala, SDCI, building official for SDCI, City of Seattle. And I'm here to discuss a revised proposal for Chapter 44 in support of WABO TCD.
And I'm Kathleen Petrie, King County, and I'm here to discuss 2 revised proposals today.
And this is Sue Kaufman with City of Tacoma, here representing WABO TCD on revised proposal for this existing building Chapter 44.
John Siu, also representing WABO TCD, here to discuss the modified loft proposal.
Ken Brulette, City of Seattle Fire Department.
Thanks, Kim. I think Kim just introduced herself. Kim, we could barely hear you. Just want you to know. All right. Anybody else before we move on to item 2 on the agenda? All right. Thank you all for attending this morning. So item 2 is to review and approve the agenda. So if tag members have a chance to look at that, please make a motion.
So moved.
Thank you. Have a second?
Second.
Second.
Appreciate that. Any additional discussion on the agenda for this morning? Excellent. If there's any opposition to that motion, please say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Stoyan, do we have minutes from the last two meetings?
I think we do. Annette, do we have minutes?
Yes, we do. Sorry, it was taking me a minute. We have minutes from May 9th, and then we also have the minutes from the 23rd. I will show those next.
Okay, excellent. So we'll start with a motion on the minutes from May 9th.
Move to accept.
Thank you, Ron. We have a second. We have to have the same folks repeating motions. There's only a few of us. All right, we will come back.
I
Oh,
can
go
say
ahead.
I wasn't at the original meeting, but I can second the motion.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, we do have a motion and a second to approve the May 9th meetings. Any additional discussion? Great. If there's any opposed to that motion, please say nay. Great. Moving on to the May 23rd meeting minutes, please.
Move to accept.
Okay. We'll wait just a moment for those to pop up.
There we go.
Thank you. We do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. Any additional discussion?
You know, if we could get the minutes before the meeting, it would be great. I'm generally uncomfortable approving something that I haven't read.
Okay.
We are really struggling in the minutes because we have meetings back to back, a few meetings per day, and it's so be patient with us.
Oh, understand. It's just, you know, maybe we catch them up the next meeting, or I don't know if we actually have a next meeting, but I understand.
That makes sense. Maybe we could also look at sending out the recordings sooner than later, although they're not a summary minute, but at least it would have the information available.
We are able to post the recordings faster, but the minutes take time because again, it's only Annette and she can't keep up with all these meetings that are in a row.
Understandable. All right, so noted. Thank you for the discussion, Annie.
Will these minutes actually be posted online soon?
Yes, once they're approved. I posted them this morning. I just got them finished. I apologize for that. So they are on today's meeting. If you go to our website and look, and then once they're approved, I will have them posted for the meetings they pertain to.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again for the discussion. Any additional comments or questions on the meeting minutes, summary minutes?
Just want to say thank you to Annette for all her hard work trying to keep up with us.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hopefully Stoyan will get somebody on staff, extra staff soon. So thank you, Annette, and thank you, Stoyan. All right. If there's any opposition to the motion to approve the May 23rd minutes, please say nay. Fantastic. Hearing none, all that motion carries. Moving on in the agenda. We are to reviewing code change proposals. I know everyone's so excited for these.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We will go in order of what's on the sheet. If the sheet is correct, then it would be proposal 003 and the revisions for that. And I believe, Sherry,
So,
go ahead, Stoyan.
okay, sorry, Michael, to cut you off. This is what we have so far. We have 3 approved, and the rest of it is hanging. I hope we will be able to finish today. If we can't, it will be difficult to meet the deadline for the council meeting, but let's talk about it later. So this morning we have 003, but I think Sue asked if she can have a few minutes because she has an appointment, and her proposal has only editorial modifications. Number 53, only editorial modifications, so it won't take a long time. And then we'll have Sherry also requested if she can do it up front, but I think with Sue will be faster.
Okay, so that means we are moving to, and I apologize, you said the number 053.
Here is the proposal.
Stoyan, is this the one that I emailed you this morning?
This is the one that you emailed me this morning. Yes.
Okay, great.
Do
Okay.
do you have the modified areas highlighted or track changes something?
I did not. I tried to get a clean version to you, but
I have them highlighted on my screen. I don't know if it's okay for me to do a screen share.
Okay. Let
yeah,
me.
I think that Ardell could probably easily do that, and then we could just we did discuss most of the proposal from last week. And so this is really just cleanup of a few items, just some clarifications, and so yeah, okay. So so Ardell has a version that she was able to get done yesterday.
Thanks for swapping this out. Hi again, my name's Ardell Jala with SDCI, and Sue's presented the overall proposal previously. As I go through these changes, feel free to stop me and let me know when you want to dig into a section further. They are primarily editorial. There are a couple of technical changes, but they are, as you may know, that these are currently also being discussed for the 2024 national code change proposals. And so what we've done is taken some of the committee action hearing results and incorporated them into our state proposal where we felt it was appropriate. And so that's what you'll see here today is one of the fairly significant structural proposals that got into the 2024 code change proposal that WABO also has a version of and will be taking to national at the public comment hearings. So here we have, can everybody see this screen? Yeah, okay. So R10271, again, the scoping is for existing buildings, but it first gets charged in chapter 1. Here I've expanded the scope to reflect what's in the chapter, which is additions, alterations, repairs, or relocations. And so that's been added to chapter 1. As we keep going further, slight change to reference a building instead of a structure, as that has become consistent language throughout IRC. This is the structural changes that were approved in RB 297 at the committee action hearings. And this is more specific language within existing buildings that will carry throughout all of the sections that are scoped in chapter 44. Compliance section is the first one. And so this is where we talk about more general requirements. And it says to comply with the provisions of this chapter and of chapter 3 through 10 of the IRC unless noted otherwise. So again, chapter 44 is the break to full code compliance. 44022 is minimum design loads. And this clarifies that the structure shall be designed for the loads applicable at the time the building was constructed. And then within each scoping, alterations, repairs, or additions, that gets further clarified. So that's the unless noted otherwise. And again, and a reference also back to 10271, which when you uncover work structural components that are unsafe, that they shall be repaired. This next one is one that might want discussion. 440223 is unreinforced masonry parapet bracing, which is, this is language out of the model code change proposal that requires unreinforced masonry buildings, again, in the SRC, or pardon, in the IRC, that are in seismic design category D or E, to get their parapets, brace, and wall anchors installed at the roof line whenever a re-roofing permit is issued. And again, how that would be enforced across jurisdictions may vary, because re-roofing permits requirements do vary across jurisdictions. It also requires that parapet bracing and wall anchors be of an approved design. And so that could reference both an engineered design or a prescriptive design, depending on the rules that are in place at a jurisdiction. Going further through, just some cleanup of language on regardless of the category work. That's unnecessary language, so we took that out of these two sections here. There's some renumbering going on because of the addition of the structural section. 4402.7 is features exceeding code requirements, and you can always go above and beyond code, so this just seemed like an unnecessary section. So we've stricken that. Again, a reference to structural was added to each of these scoping sections. So right now, if you're in 4403, the scoping goes in order of repairs, and so you'll see that first here in repairs. The next section is alterations. Again, this particular change is an editorial comment. Alterations shall not cause the existing building to become less compliant than it was prior to this work being completed. And then this language is stricken because it's already part of R10271. So it's there's no need to duplicate it here, because if you duplicate it here, then you should duplicate it in all the sections. And so it didn't make sense under one of the subsections. Newly constructed elements shall meet new code. Again, we are in the alteration section. So if you're building new, meet new. And the exceptions are, this was in the version last time. What we've stricken is newly installed electrical equipment shall comply with the requirements of section 4508.5, which is, and Sue, correct me here, was this just a leftover from a reference in your version of it?
Yeah, and you're right. We don't need to restate this. This is just.
We already say in the charging that new means new, so it doesn't need to be restated. Thanks. 4404.4, again, we're in the alteration section, so we're repeating the structural reference language here. These sections that follow are there's no change here from what the version you last saw. This is a cleanup. Here we had the exceptions 1 and 2. This was a repeat of language of exception 1, and so we didn't need that section. It's this is a just cleanup here. As we continue going through, there's no changes to the version you last saw. So again, until we get into the addition section, which again, we add the reference for structural. This is a newer one, 4405.6. This is also something that was approved at the committee action hearings. And so again, to try and in an effort to align with what's being approved at the national level, we've pulled this section into the additions, and it's a reference to exterior wall coverings per chapter 7. And sorry, there is a slight area, this needs to say or. So that's an add versus the version that you've had, and I'll clean that up and send that back to you, Stoyan. It's insulated vinyl siding, polypropylene siding, and vinyl siding shall be attached to a nailable substrate or other substrate suitable for mechanical fasteners. And what is a nailable substrate? That is a term that got pulled into the 21 code, so that is a defined term. Relocations. This is a sentence that compliance with the requirements of this chapter is required. if the moved buildings or structures undergo substantial alterations as defined in R10791, that is a reference that doesn't exist in the state code, and so we've stricken it here. And it just goes back to the model code language, which is that if you relocate a building within the jurisdiction that and you're not changing the use or classification, then you just get to move it. But the foundation needs to comply with the requirements of new construction. And that's it. That's a summary of the changes versus the version that you've seen last.
And Ardell, I think that they could just take the version that they have right now and put that little or in there that you just added.
Yeah, so that's here. And 44056.
And then that's the version that that they have.
Yep.
Which incorporated all these red line changes. So
I will prefer the red line changes
okay.
if you
Okay.
can send me.
I'll go ahead and send you that, Stoyan. Thanks.
Okay.
I just gotta
Appreciate it.
clean it up from take off some of the editorial comments on the side here. Thanks. Are there any other questions on these changes or on the base document?
Hi, this is Todd Short. I'm representing the fire service. Can you just provide me a little bit of the scope of what this is doing? And because I'm guessing or making an assumption that all, say, local planning requirements about a moved structure would still be in place, but we're only talking about the actual building construction itself. Oftentimes when we look at a building permit, we're looking at it for access and different items that are generally covered under planning requirements. Just maybe give me an overview about what are we trying to achieve with this proposal?
Todd, are you specifically asking about the section on relocations or the whole chapter?
Yeah, well, mainly the relocations is what's concerning me, because this sounds like this is saying it'd be okay to move a structure to a new location and not necessarily have to come up to current code.
And that is, I mean, so that's the purpose of this section, is that there needed, so what we heard as WABO, that there was need for clarification of relocations. And so can you move a residential structure into a jurisdiction? So if, potentially, yes, you could, if you moved that structure, and again, we don't have anything to do with the planning requirements or anything like that. So that definitely would have to be, fixed. And then, any kind of a new foundation would have to meet the requirements for new code. But if you had an existing structure and it met the original classification, you didn't change the structure, then potentially, yes, you could move the structure in. And again, this is an existing building chapter that we are trying to.
How long has it been? It's been a long.
That we're trying to, provide reasonable provisions for people to work with their existing buildings and not have to comply with new code for everything.
The assumption, though, Sue, is also that this was previously permitted from the location it's coming from.
Yes, correct.
Okay, and there's a lot of conversations about modular and moving things, and so if we create a new short plat or a new long plat, it's our anticipation that that building or structure would then be compliant with the current code. For instance, in Redmond, if we had an existing building that did not have fire sprinklers and they moved it, this is suggesting that they would not have to have fire sprinklers, although in a new lot, they would be. So I guess that's my concern. And it sounds like maybe the planning requirements would deal with those issues, but I just wanted to raise that as a question.
Okay, thanks, Todd. We can explore that question a little further. I think Ken had some input on the first question, though. Is that correct, Ken?
I did. So Todd, this is kind of how I look at for section 503 for access and then also for water. In the charging sections, it talks about moved into or within the jurisdiction. So I've been able to use that before for homes, either if we annexed an area or if a home got moved. The one thing I don't think the code addresses is what you just brought up about the sprinklers, since you have a separate ordinance for that. But I believe you could still use your 503 and your, was it 507 for water. So I think you're covered on those two, but I'm not too sure about your sprinklers.
Thank you, Ken.
So can I comment on the sprinkler?
Yes.
The Zardell SDCI. And I think you could modify this locally in chapter 1 from a jurisdiction to jurisdiction standpoint. Maybe the council or the TAG could comment on that. If you wanted to require sprinklers as part of a move to the new platted location. But Ken, you can correct me here because we do defer to SFD on fire sprinkler requirements. But I personally would look at it as this is moving into the jurisdiction. It was an existing building that was compliant and permitted at the time it was constructed, and movable buildings are designed as movable buildings. And so if we would not require it to be brought into compliance unless there was a local ordinance that required all single family or, you know, that required these types of movable buildings in the IRC, right? These are residential buildings. We wouldn't trigger sprinklers since there was no change in how it was being used.
So I think what we have to look at is when it's moved to the new location, then we have to look at the access that's to that location, and then look at the water supply for the nearest hydrant for fire protection. And that's where the dilemma comes in, is where it was previously located, there might not have been an access or hydrant and fire flow issue. But now where you move it to, there could be, and that could trigger.
But those are external to the IRC triggers. So that would still apply. I think you would still get it based on those requirements, Ken. But from an IRC requirement, the low flow, the distance to the hydrant are not within our IRC triggers.
But it's within the fire code, because the fire code says that.
I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying that you would still get sprinklers in that, and it would be triggered based on the IFC requirements.
Exactly, yes.
But we wouldn't, out of the IRC provisions, trigger sprinklers.
No, not in our town, no.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, John, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, just real quickly, I was scrambling around to look for it. Just another thing to consider is that this is consistent or not inconsistent with how the IEBC deals with relocated or moved buildings. There's not, looking at the IEB, it's a different code, but they only deal with foundations and wind and seismic loads and flood hazards when you relocate buildings. They do say that has to be safe for human occupancy, so that there's going to be some judgment in there. But that's I can say this is not inconsistent with that approach.
Okay, thanks, John. I wanted to add a little bit to it. I want us to keep in mind that these are statewide code change proposals, and they may not all work exactly how you have adopted items. So in other words, this proposal won't take sprinklers into account because they are not adopted by the state for 1 and 2 family. If you do have an ordinance that says they are required, then that would apply. I think as Ardell indicated, outside of these requirements, you have an additional standard that is not a state standard. This is a state standard. So Hopefully that answers your question some, Todd, or gives some direction. Did you need some further information on that at this time?
No, I think that's clear. It's just, I think our jurisdiction would probably view this as a new dwelling unit on a lot, and that requirement that we have locally would apply. And that's where I was sort of saying, I think this is dealt with through our land use entitlement process, not necessarily at the building permit level.
Okay, great, Todd. Thanks, everyone. All right, are there other questions or discussion points? And that is also for members of the public that are attending the meeting, not just tag members. So please.
Just a comment. Relocated buildings, you could go from a snow load of 25 pounds per square foot to a snow load of 70 pounds per square foot in the same jurisdiction. I don't see that issue being addressed at all in the section that's on the screen right now.
Okay.
Could you repeat that again?
So in our jurisdiction out on the Olympic Peninsula, we can go from 25 pound snow load to 70, 80 pound snow load as you go up into the mountains. And I'm not seeing that the relocated building provisions speak specifically to a jurisdiction saying you've got to address the structural components of the roof should you move it into a higher snow load.
So can I comment on that, Sue? You're right, Annie. I agree with you, and I would we can look at adding specific structural language similarly to how we've added structural to all of these other sections up above. But I personally would go back to the charging language in 102.7.1 that would say you can't create a nonconformity. And so if moving a building into a jurisdiction that had different requirements created a nonconformity, I would go back and ask for that to be designed for that.
Thank you.
Great question, great answer. Any additional questions or comments? Okay. So today we will need to take some votes on the tag recommendation for these. Am I correct in saying that, Stoyan, before I jump the gun on anything?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fabulous. So as you've been shown and discussed, the 053 proposal for a new chapter 44 has been revised, and want to get a motion from the tag on whether or not we would recommend moving this forward to the BFP committee as an approved proposal or a disapproved proposal. So I will open the floor to tag members for a motion, please.
It's Damon Doyle. I move approval.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. And I think we just need to clarify revised and amended.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Stoyan, how do you want that motion to be noted, that we are approving for recommendation the revised proposal?
It will be, do you see the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, so here is 53. We have the initial proposal, we have the revision, and I need to update the revision because I wasn't aware of the new revision. So I will replace this, and here we will have the recommendation for the council and the BFP committee approve as modified.
Okay. Please say nay. Hearing none, that motion carries. Excellent. Thank you all. Thank you to Sue and Ardell for explaining those changes today. We will move on to 003 revised for Sherry as requested. Thank you for being patient, Sherry.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for having me today. And Stoyan, is this what I emailed this morning or what I emailed Friday?
Here is the last version that you emailed this morning.
Oh, okay, thank you. And so thank you everybody for talking about this today. And I really appreciate all of the comments and questions from last time. And so I was reviewing my notes and reviewing the video online in order to make some modifications to the proposal. And what I've done is I've highlighted in yellow the modifications to the proposal. And so someone had emailed me separately and suggested instead of calling this a large home, calling it something else. So I've, for our discussion today, called it a plex structure, or it could be and instead of a large home. And then there was a comment last time about, does this have accessory dwelling units allowed in it or not? And so I've clarified that within the definition that there would be no accessory dwelling units in it. There would be a certain number of dwelling units in it, and that is it, which would be 3 to 6. And I've added a couple of sections into it to clarify some of the questions that were asked. One of the things that I've shifted in here is there was a request for this to really have seismic provisions under IBC, and so I've clarified that in the R301.
Sorry.
Point. Oh, that's okay.
Where do you want
Just
me
going down this very next one, you're right there. I've just clarified that this would refer to seismic provisions in the IBC. I think there was a concern about that instead of it being prescriptive last time. And then I think the very next thing to talk about is that one of the things I think that's important about this proposal is that it's proposing that we have these smaller scale multifamily units that then have a prescriptive way of treating fire resistance. They have a prescriptive way of protecting the exodine and establishing what the width of the exodine is and how many exit discharges, et cetera. And so those are some of the questions that came up last time. And then what I'm proposing, if you scroll down just a little bit more, Stoyan, under the R302.3, and I realized that at some point in time, this would all get renumbered and utilize the actual state code instead of the model code. But so essentially that's what I've put here is to, I've clarified grade, plane, and separating any kind of common area or path of egress with a 2-hour resistance. I've also specified that each dwelling unit would have an exit access to the shared path of egress, and that each sleeping room within the dwelling unit would have an emergency escape and rescue opening per 310. So that's here at the bottom of the screen. And that the path of egress would be protected by a 2-hour fire resistance rating, and specified a prescriptive width for the path of egress if they're in this under 5,000 square foot building. It would have a prescriptive width of 42 inches minimum, and otherwise meet R311, and then have 2 exit discharges to the public way. And then I've reduced potentially that prescriptive width for the path of egress if there's a sprinkler system. So that's what I've done for the up to 5,000, and I've done something similar in scale for the up to 8,000. structure. So that's what all of the next sections are discussing, is this prescriptive separation for the exiting and prescriptive width for the exiting, and then making sure that there's an escape window in each sleeping room, and that there would be two exit discharges from the shared path of egress. The other thing that was brought up last time was interconnection for the smoke alarms. And because all of this is duplicating, we could just scroll down to that story in the R314 here, where I've called for there to be an interconnection of the required smoke alarms, and that any actuation would affect smoke alarms either in a path of egress or common area and all the dwelling units. So anything triggered in one section of the building would trigger it in all parts of the building. And then last time there was a concern about accessibility, and R320 currently refers certain projects being permitted under IRC to the building code for accessibility. And so I've essentially changed that here to 3 or more dwelling units instead of 4 or more dwelling units, in order to accommodate accessibility. And of course, fair housing would be triggered at any rate as well. And so that's really the sum of the changes that I've made. And so last time there was a discussion about, well, why not just modify the IBC instead of modifying the IRC? And how I and colleagues who are proposing this see this is that these are small structures with a small number of dwelling units in them, and that there's a certain logic to creating prescriptive life safety and prescriptive exiting, prescriptive fire separations to the IRC to accommodate them, instead of doing significant modifications and exceptions in the IBC. And so that's why I would see this as an appropriate change to the IRC. Currently, when people are applying for construction permits, they can choose to meet the requirements of both the IRC and the IBC. Often in single family permits in Seattle, people choose to meet IRC for ordinance and IBC for structural. And somebody could continue to do that with this type of proposal, or there could be local amendments that fit with each different jurisdiction appropriately. But I think what I'm trying to do here is create the possibility that if a jurisdiction would like to regulate these small apartment buildings under the IRC, they have the option to do that. And I think I'll just open it to discussion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Sherry, for the updated changes. All right, if we could maybe move back to the top of the proposal, and then let's open the floor for discussion. So if folks want to have questions or concerns, go ahead, John.
Okay, hi. So I do have pretty big concerns with this, despite, if we can there's language fixes that can be made if people really want to go forward with this, but I really have trouble with this overall. One thing, Sherry, I that probably missed last time, is that this will create a conflict with the scoping section in our section 101.5, I believe, where it talks about the separate means of egress. So if this were to go forward, you'd have to modify that.
Okay.
However, my objections are more kind of philosophical, I guess. Oh, and by the way, I do think there is just looking in the latest draft, the seismic provisions, starting to scroll up just a hair. Yeah, I wasn't sure what number 2 and what the difference is between number 2 and number 3. You have plex structures in both, so I don't know if you meant to delete it out of number 2. Again, technical thing, but
It's more that I was suggesting there's 2 thresholds of plex structures. One is up to 5,000 and one is up to 8,000 square feet in area.
okay.
Unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, but
Well,
at any rate,
yeah,
if this was to move forward, it would all get cleaned up. So
okay, to me that there's some confusion in there. You got
Sure.
plex structures in both. Okay, but philosophically, I think this is somewhat inconsistent with what the SBCC did last cycle as far as townhouse sprinklers. And so, now townhouses with more than 4 units are required to be sprinklers. Sprinklered. This to me is a more hazardous situation than townhouses. And therefore, but we're allowing up to whatever this, I forget, 6, I believe it's 6 structure dwelling units without sprinklers. And so I think that's inconsistent.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, again, looking at the latest draft, I know someone said last time interconnected smokes. I really think that's a really bad idea in when you don't have control of your own space. Someone's burned toast is gonna, get everybody. So I think that's kind of a problem. But also I would ask the question that I don't know the answer to, whether that would violate the listings where the interconnected smokes are allowed in multiple dwelling units. I don't know, or in common spaces. They may not fit the listing. So that one I don't know. But the other thing I'll just say is that I've talked to some people from the Midwest in Shelby County in particular, and they weren't too happy with that, first of all, when it went through. And what I last heard, and maybe something you need to look at, is the state fire marshal basically put it on hold because they were not involved in the process, and they were let's say surprised
Okay.
when it went through. So I believe it's being held at the state level right now. I haven't heard what's happened since then. So I guess those are my comments on this. I really think this is it should be in the IBC, not in the IRC. So that's my opinion. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Other folks like to talk on this or discuss this proposal? Ken, go ahead.
I was really thinking other people were going to talk, so I was trying to be nice and just wait. So Sherry, I got a question for you. When do you envision these structures to have attached garages?
I wasn't envisioning or not envisioning that, but I think that would probably be something that would need to be it could be specifically dealt with in it. The IRC already is dealing with attached garages and having the 1 hour separation from attached garages to the rest of the dwelling unit just for 1 and 2 family structures. So it could be that we specify that there's a 2 hour separation for an attached garage, but it would be just whatever ultimately made sense for the proposal.
Okay, and then I guess my second question was, if it did have an attached garage, would that be part of your square foot threshold of your 5,000 or 8,000 square feet? Would you include that square footage in this 302.3.2 plex structures under 5,000?
I feel like on some level that's a philosophical question because I would personally want to prioritize housing for people over housing for cars. But I think in terms of life safety, I think that if somebody was going to put attached garages inside the structure, then we really would need to include that in the volume thresholds that I'm suggesting.
Okay.
So yeah, so yes,
okay.
to answer your question.
So then, I guess back to your philosophically, how did you come up with the 5,000 and 8,000?
So what we did was, and as John was referring to previously, there's been a proposal in Shelby County. And so we took the proposal from Shelby County, and that was the basis of this proposal. And so they came up with this 5,000 and 8,000 square foot threshold. And I think it seemed reasonable to us in terms of if you're going to have 4 to 6 units and you potentially have 2 and 3 bedroom units, at least in some of it, then that is a reasonable threshold to propose. So that's where that came from. I feel like in terms of if this moving forward with this type of proposal, it would be a matter of if somebody has a different opinion, then I'd be willing, I'd like to hear it.
Okay. And then I guess lastly, I'll just agree with John Sue regarding the interconnection of the smoke alarms. I agree what he brought up, and then also the townhome sprinkler. So I won't reiterate that.
Sure.
But your last statement that you made at your ending of your proposal, I thoroughly agree with. These are apartment buildings and it should be in the IBC. So that's my opinion. So thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Ken. Any other members of the public or the TAG want to provide discussion on this?
I can chime in here. I think I like where you're going, Sherry, but I have this aversion to mixing the IBC and the IRC. And it's either should be in one or the other. I think it should belong in the IBC. Just looking at the proposal specifically, a few what I call emissions, there's no reference to supporting walls. So we have all these 2-hour separations, but we don't talk about supporting walls meeting that same fire resistant rating.
Oh, it does at the bottom of the proposal, or it's yeah.
That's shown. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, 302, 3.4. That all supporting construction.
Okay, great. The other question I had is in 30122, where it talks about the seismic provisions. We need to include seismic design category E as well.
Okay.
I'm a little reticent to having regular references to the IBC where we talk, what was it, 302, 321, where we talk about, you know, go to the IBC to find out what your fire ratings look like.
I want to, I'm not, which portion are you referring to?
302.1.2, excuse me, 302.3.2.1.
Okay.
It was the new language that you added there.
I
see. You just say, go see the IBC for that information. And, you know, I think the goal with the IRC is that it was a standalone document that you could get what you needed out of that document without constantly running back to the IBC.
Right. I think, let's see, I think that just
Sherry, can I jump in here on that
Sure.
point? I'm going to say that some of that language, although it is underlined, is current language in the IRC, Annie. without change. It's just brought over, maybe renumbered. But however, there is several references in 302 that send you back to the testing requirements in the IBC.
Okay. Okay.
And it also sends you to the IBC currently in the IRC for in R320 for accessibility.
And does do the ADA requirements start at 4 units or 3 units? I noticed you shoved it from 4 to 3, and I thought
Well,
from a fair housing and ADA requirement, it was 4 or more.
it is 4 or more, but what I was suggesting in this is because this is a proposal for 3 to 6 units, that it would start at 3 essentially. But
I think consistency with the federal law is probably the best.
Okay.
A best approach on that.
Okay.
I appreciate the fact that you put separation in between the common areas and the units. I was having real heartburn over those those omissions in the first go round. That's everything for me.
Thanks.
Thank you, Annie. All right, taking them in order that I see the hands up, and that would be John.
Yeah. So Annie just wanted and Sherry about the seismic design category E. I want to be careful with that one. Just don't. I don't think we. I don't know how you want to do this, but the code already requires anything in seismic in SDCE has to go to the IBC. Period. So that's why it's probably not addressed in there. This came up in another proposal somewhere else, and I can't remember exactly. And Andy, you'd asked about that, I think, before. And you don't want to start adding SDCE into all of these because, again, those are supposed to go directly to the IBC. If you look at 301.2.2, so in the base code. Just want to throw that in.
Thanks.
Thanks, John. Todd?
Yeah, thank you. I would reiterate what Ken Brule had mentioned in Seattle from Seattle Fire. But Sherry, I know you're putting a lot of effort into omitting or not necessarily having to require fire sprinklers, and I guess I'm going to need to stand in this group and say I really believe in fire sprinklers, and I think when we start stacking living units and we start having people in a one structure, multiple cooking facilities, heating, etc. We see the results of that. Often in our jurisdiction, we're burning down these kinds of structures that don't have fire sprinklers. So I think there is a real value, and I just wanted to speak to the value in that. I'm opposed to this. I was opposed to it when I heard it originally. No offense or anything. I really appreciate what you're trying to do in terms of affordable housing. I just think that we're missing the boat if we don't put sprinklers in, especially from a resiliency, sustainability, and an environmental perspective. We see too much of what happens out there in structures like these that are not fire sprinklered. So just wanted to provide that comment.
I definitely appreciate that. And I think the question I would ask is, how do we do this? How do we create affordability for these small structures? Well,
I would be more than happy to have conversations with you aside from this, and especially from perspective of, a lot of things are being done with 13D fire sprinkler standard, which is the least expensive. And we could certainly have conversations about that. I'd welcome that.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you, Todd. We have Ardell.
Actually, I think everything's been stated. I wanted to just do a Me Too wave, but I also think it would be helpful, Sherry, and maybe it's outside of this, maybe it's beyond the scope of an ask for a tag meeting, is to see a side-by-side of our 2 requirements out of the building code versus this proposal. And what are the breaks that you are asking for? Is it sprinklers alone, or are there other provisions? Because what I'm hearing is that you don't want to ask for a break in the IBC. You want to completely move it into IRC. And does that make sense? Could it be a code change proposal in the IBC?
And I think, and
because all the accessibility, all of the fire, all the openings relative to the property line, all of the other R2 requirements are sort of where I don't know what I don't know unless I see a full in-depth code analysis of what we're actually giving a break on here.
Right. And I really appreciate that comment, because when I was revising this, I was going through the IBC and trying to come up with something that is prescriptive for exiting, prescriptive for fire separation. And I think that is why I'm suggesting that it is in here, so that there's something prescriptive that a design professional, a small contractor, builder, developer can be familiar with, as opposed to going through the entire IBC, going through all of the exceptions. I mean, I guess what let's see, I think the easier way to say what I'm thinking about is that if we change this in the IBC, then we're going to have all of these exceptions, or almost like its own little section for small scale apartment buildings, as opposed to, what applies to a 10-story building applying to a 3-story 4-unit building. And so I'm just
I think that would be helpful in the comparison then.
Yeah.
Because what I don't hear is a comparison of the hazard.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So when you say, here's this prescriptive package that makes it almost equivalent to an R2 building in the IBC, I don't have enough in front of me to make that assessment of, is that truly, I'm not going to say it's equivalent because it doesn't have sprinklers, but is it providing a reasonable level of safety? And right now I don't see that it does.
Gotcha.
Without
I definitely appreciate
without sprinklers.
I
So
definitely
thanks.
appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ardell. Thank you, Sherry. So I'll jump in and share a few of my concerns. I still have concerns with the definition. It's talking about, I don't know, it's just going way beyond what I think it should. You do have in there mentioning the building includes a functional street facing primary entrance. Is that an entrance to the corridor or an entrance to units? I'm just not sure what you're meaning there. And speaking of corridors, that is a term that is not used in the IRC. However, you are using it similar to the IBC, but you're not carrying over the definition from the IBC. So I do have some concerns there. Is how are you using corridors? I do understand what you're trying to get at with the common path of egress, but again, it's not called common path of egress here. You're calling it a shared path of egress, which also, how is that defined and what would that look like? You're indicating that these dwelling units need to be separated from the common areas by 2 hours. Would that mean that the path of egress has to have a 2-hour separation from each unit as well? I'm not real clear on that. I think that's what you were going for, but that's not explicit in here, in my opinion, of course. And then I'm just going to kind of parrot. I won't parrot. I'll do the Me Too wave. And what we mean by a Me Too wave, for those that don't attend the national hearing, instead of repeat testimony from a bunch of folks in the room, they just give a big, nice, happy wave. As a Me Too, I say the same thing. So that's what the Me Too wave is for there. So if you hear that term, that's what that means. So I'll give a similar Me Too wave on several other items in here. And then I'll still allow for additional discussion if there's anyone else. And if not, I will open the floor.
You muted.
Sorry, I will open the floor to a recommendation motion from the tag.
This is Ron. Can I just, what would be some alternative motions rather than just saying, no, we don't want it to go forward? Maybe we should recommend that this go over to the IBC tag group.
Good question, Ron. I will answer that, and Stoyan can jump in if I'm incorrect. We did have a meeting with the Assistant Attorney General that represents us this last week. He did indicate that we do need a recommendation from the tag whether to approve or disapprove, and send that forward to the BFP committee, one way or the other. And then if the proponent would like to further modify that and bring it back again, they do have that opportunity at the BFP committee. And then the BFP committee can choose to send it back to the tag if they wish. However, we hope that's not the case. But that was my indication, and Stoyan, correct me if I'm wrong, that we do need some type of recommendation from the tag.
That's correct. I will second it. And regarding the IBC, currently we are reviewing the structural provisions, so chapter 16 and up, and I don't know where this proposal will fit in the IBC. I'm talking about the current rulemaking.
Okay, did that answer your question, Ron?
Yes.
Okay, then we have a hand up from John.
So just want to clarify, Stoyan. So you're saying that if it didn't land in the structural chapters, then it'd have to wait till next cycle?
Yes. I haven't evaluated the proposal in detail, how it will fit in the building code, but I don't see, I see a few sections, subsections with structural provisions, but I don't see the entire proposal being in one of the chapters that currently the IBC TAC is working on.
Okay, thanks. And that would only be if the proponent takes the recommendation to move this over to the IBC, correct?
Yes. Well, also the technical advisory group can refer it to or request, but that's something that we don't do very often.
Okay. All right, thank you for the input. So if all the tag members are understanding what we need, I would entertain a motion to recommend approval or disapproval of this proposal to the BFP committee.
Micah, this is Todd Short. I would make a motion that this proposal, or that we disapprove this proposal.
All right, thank you, Todd. Do we have a second for that proposal or for that motion?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Annie and Ron. So we have a motion for disapproval. Is there any other discussion from the tag members at this time? All right, hearing none. If there's any opposition to that motion, please say nay. Hearing none, that motion carries. Sherry, thank you for your time on this. If you're not aware, you do have an opportunity to further modify this or bring the.
Oops. I'm sorry, I stopped hearing
You see
you,
the-
Micah.
Oh, he looks like a nice dog, though.
Oh, yeah, I guess his video stopped.
We appreciate it.
I couldn't hear everything you said, Micah. You kind of stopped, but if I am understanding correctly, if I want to, I can modify the proposal, even though it's disapproved, and talk about it at the BFP, which I think is pretty soon. It's in a week or something like that, or later this week.
We are trying to have it scheduled for next Wednesday, 9 o'clock.
Not 2 days from now, but a week and 2 days from now.
A week and 2 days, yes.
Thank you. And then I just want to say that I really, really appreciate everybody discussing this and entertaining it, and for all of the feedback. And I think what I would like to do is potentially, there's a couple of different people who've either emailed me separately, and I'm just wondering if there's a few people who are here today on the committee, if I can email separately and just talk further about it if people are open to that.
If you're asking me, I think that would be great if you emailed some folks and got
Yeah.
further feedback and input. Feel free to do that.
Great.
And
Okay.
I know if you want to email John Sue, he is also a member or a consultant for Washington Association of Building Officials Technical Co-Development Group. And that way we can possibly bring this before our group and maybe get some additional input from other folks around the state.
That would be great. And it sounded like Todd and Ardell would be open to it as well from what I heard them say. So, okay, well, I really appreciate everybody's time and energy. So thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. We appreciate your time and effort on this. All right. Moving on to, is there anyone else on the call that needed to have a proposal moved up a little earlier? So in case they've got something else going on, I want to make sure I provide that opportunity to everyone that is on.
We have 2 electric vehicle charging proposals, number 26 and number 91.
Okay.
And
if we could hear those back to back, that'd be great.
That's what, yeah.
All right. So with that, we will start with proposal 026. And once that comes up, Thad, I'll let you take over and explain your changes.
Thanks for the opportunity. This is Thad.
6 with the changes in track changes shown in green and different colors.
So thanks for the opportunity of bringing a revised version back. The purpose and benefits of the proposal haven't changed. We're going to need many more chargers to meet the state's 2035 targets for electric vehicle adoption. And the easiest place for drivers to charge an EV is at home. We're going to need those chargers well within the lifetime of the buildings that we'll be putting up under the next version of the IRC. Providing the infrastructure for them during construction is at least several times less expensive than adding it later. And the studies that Kathleen's revised proposal cites estimate the cost of retrofitting the charging circuit in a 1 or 2 family dwelling at 5 times the cost of running it during construction compared to my 3 times. They estimate that the additional costs of retrofits in bigger buildings are mostly even larger multiples of the costs of providing them during construction. The savings from adding charging infrastructure during construction will more than make up for the costs of providing it in some residences where it isn't used for a while. I've made a number of changes on the basis of your suggestions and concerns. I've added language to require chargers in ADUs that have their own electrical meters and have required parking that's close enough to the ADU for charging. I've simplified the requirement for townhouses that have required parking for residents, but only have 10 units or less. I still think that having a receptacle in a garage makes things much simpler for a resident who wants to add a charger than having a 240 circuit in a junction box and then needing to hire an electrician and having an inspection visit done. But I've allowed a junction box as well because there were several people in the conversation who thought that was a better idea. Other than that, I've changed details to address problems with the terms I used. I've appended something in the affordability section with some more details about the study that was brought up from the National Association of Home Builders about the effects of $1,000 increase in price on pricing people out of buying homes. There's one mistake that I need to ask Stoyan to fix before we start. Stoyan, right down under the table, there's an exception, and that exception is supposed to read townhouses with 6 or fewer required spaces, and not townhouses with fewer than 6 required spaces. So if you could change that, that'd be good. I have removed a couple of little sections where the consensus in the discussion last time seemed to be that they were just duplicating things that were already taken care of in the residential code, and that therefore they didn't need to be in here. So that's it, really. I mean, my basic goals are pretty simple. If new residences have private parking, we ought to be making it easier for the people living in them to add charging for an EV when they get one. The requirements for townhouses with surface parking ought to parallel the ones that the council's already moving forward for apartments built under the IBC. I don't know whether you'd like me to kind of walk through all of the details in the way that Ardell did, or whether you're clear enough about the whole thing so that we can just talk about particular items. But whichever you'd like to do is okay with me.
Okay. You're actually the proponent, so if you wanted to go through each change and explain that, that would be fine. But if the tag feels that you've covered that and they have had a chance to review it and see your items in green, then we can just discuss those items as tagged. So
I just don't know how much time people have had to look at it in detail and whether it would be helpful for us to go kind of through it a screen at a time, or whether people just have a certain number of questions that they want to ask.
All right.
Hearing nothing, we may as well just kind of go through it by steps, I guess, just in case there's anything that people might miss otherwise. So Diane, if you could go back to the top, let's see.
I think he's at the first change there.
Okay. I didn't know what section this ought to go in, so I gave it an arbitrary new section number. I got rid of everything about accessory structures because it turned out that there are a lot of accessory structures I had never thought of, like music studios. The 335.1 now applies the provisions of the section to the residences that are covered under the IRC, leaving out a few odd cases that are in the IRC's definition, and adds ADUs with required parking in their own electrical meters. If your ADU doesn't have to have parking, you don't need to have a charger. I figured that if your ADU doesn't have power, which seems unlikely, or if it's an attached ADU that's drawing from the main residence's panel, or if it's on a sub panel, that might involve upgrades to the panel that would make it significantly more expensive. So I've tried to avoid that. We could, the conversation we had last time made it sound as if this next item about installation in accordance with the NEC was unnecessary. So I've deleted that. Can we go down to the exceptions then, Diane? On just the next screen, yeah. I
have a question. I'm sorry, I'm on a mobile, so I can't look at the screen right now, but you said you deleted all references to accessory buildings?
To accessory structures, yes. I have specified garages, but I haven't talked about other accessory structures.
So if I'm a car collector, so I have a detached garage that has power to it. I have to put a charging station in there?
Ron, I think he's going to get to that section here coming up in just a moment.
Yes, I think so.
Oh, I'm okay. Okay.
It seems like a rare case, but yeah, I think if you had power in the garage and you had parking at the garage, you'd have to do it. Required parking.
Well, wait a minute. Then we go to the definition required. So if there's no required parking by, which would be by zoning rather than by code, then if I have a detached garage that is not required but supplemental to the existing structure, then an electric charging wouldn't be required. Is that correct?
I think the way it's written now, that you only have to do chargers if there's required parking for the unit.
Stein, can you scroll down to there you go.
Yeah,
private
so-
garages. Ron, I think your question is answered in that section that you can't see. It indicates that that you would have to have required actually the required parking would be for ADUs. However, it does indicate with their own electrical meters. So maybe we need to discuss this section a little further. I'm not sure, based on the language revised, Thad, that whether or not Ron would be required to have it. So could you explain this section 335.2 for us real fast, Thad?
Yeah, basically this just says that if the dwelling units that are covered by the scoping have private garages, that then they have to have a dedicated circuit terminating at a charger or a receptacle outlet or a junction box that's close to where the charging equipment will eventually go. So this just goes back to the things I've included and says, here's the category for private garages. Here's what they have to have. Unless they're a detached garage that doesn't have any other electrical requirements, or you can't get close enough to the ADU for a charging cable to reach on the required parking for the ADU.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question a little bit, Ron. If not, we can come back to it. Damon, you have your hand up.
That exception number 1, detached garages that do not have other electrical requirements. I'm cloudy as to what that means.
I was trying to address one of the conversations last time was, well, what if I'm out in the country, I've got a detached garage, there's no electricity in the garage, do I have to run electricity out to it and put a charger in? So that's what that's trying to talk about, that in that situation, you don't have to have a charger there.
So if I do have electricity and lights in that garage, do I therefore need a charger?
Yes.
So maybe we should change that to electrical service.
I sort of assumed when I was thinking about this that electrical service meant that you had your own meter at the garage rather than it's running off a sub panel from the house, which is why I didn't put electrical service in there.
And here again, my struggle with this is if you have a structure and it's new with an attached garage and you put your charging circuit in, and then you build another outbuilding and another outbuilding, if they have electricity and you can park in them, or they have a bay door, then we're putting chargers in all of these. That's what I do not want to see.
How about detached garages that are not needed to fulfill the required parking for the dwelling unit are exempted?
It's muddy, but it works.
Damon, do you want me to show your idea?
Sure. Stoyan and I had a conversation following the last meeting. He was just following up with some of the comments that I'd made, and I drafted something that I thought was very simple. I know that's Ron, you may not be able to see this, but this, I think, covers 90% of the cases, if not 95 or better, and meets the intent and is very, very short and simple.
If the tag likes this, it's fine with me. I mean, basically what I've done there is trying to meet the concerns that the tag raised about these exceptions about. So if this looks better, that's certainly fine.
I think Damon was trying to tie the requirements to each dwelling unit versus, using exceptions for garages. But he can explain better. And I don't know, is it the time to show the other proposal or?
I think we probably need to go through this one and wrap it up, doing each and just make a recommendation based on each proposal at this point in our meeting schedule.
Okay.
I think what I wrote is essentially the 3351, and it essentially stops there.
So, I mean, if the tag would like to put in Damon's exception there, that's certainly fine with me.
Damon, your proposal is total.
That is correct.
Okay,
Yes.
so we wouldn't have language about dwelling units in townhouses.
Oh,
We
I'm
wouldn't
sorry.
have definitions. We wouldn't have any of that.
That
I'm
is correct.
sorry, I didn't understand that. Can we go back and look at it again then? I thought our previous conversation was
Damon, maybe I'm not reading your proposal as I should be, so help me with this. What I'm seeing is the charging paragraph says it'll apply to the construction of all new dwelling units. And an EV-ready circuit shall be installed.
That is
And
correct.
so that's it. You're just looking for, I guess I'm not seeing a link between the number of EV-ready circuits and the number of dwelling units on that particular, in that particular project.
So what I did was I took Thad's proposal from the last meeting, simply cut that first section out, simplified it. I already see a clerical error. It should say an electrical vehicle ready charge circuit. But nonetheless, it would be one circuit per dwelling unit. I do like what Thad has come up with, some other things that I think make improvements. For example, ADUs without their own power supply. I would also add that to the exceptions. The bottom line is, I'm just trying to cut to the chase, get an EV circuit in each new construction, and just keep it very simple.
So, Damon, does this mean that if I have a townhouse with a bunch of units in it, that I have to install an EV-ready circuit for every unit in the townhouse at
Yes.
initial construction?
Yes, if it has a garage or other on-site park.
Hey, Adam.
So if
Yeah,
I have a
and,
townhouse with a lot,
Southwest
and
bedroom.
say 15 units, I have to have 15 circuits for that townhouse, assuming it's for apartments.
Well, apartments fall under the IBC.
Not if they're in a townhouse.
No, I
As
understand.
I understand it.
Yeah. I did a townhouse project here in Olympia, and we put one circuit in every garage. So
That's if it has garages. Yeah, if it has a park, if the parking's in parking lots, So I walk past a townhouse every day when I'm walking. It's got 7 units for rental. Its parking is on a strip of parking spaces right behind the building. You'd have to have 7 units, 7 circuits. I mean, you'd have to supply each of those parking spaces with an EV-ready circuit under this proposal.
I really think that that's an outlier. In all the years of construction I've done, it's, garages are pretty ubiquitous these days.
Okay. So just for the TAG members, this is an option to consider when looking at these 2 EV proposals. I'm going to ask that we do go back to the original proposal at this time, let Thad wrap up going through them. Thanks, Damon, for providing that. I do think it is an option we can consider, but I definitely want to give Thad time to go through the rest of his proposal, and we can make a determination on his proposal, whether we want to approve or disapprove. And then if we do want to bring your modified language up as an alternative, we can do that at the time. If you don't mind.
That sounds good.
Thank you. All right, Thad, go ahead.
So I cut the provision about electrical vehicle supply equipment because there were at least a couple of people in the conversation the last time who said that's not necessary. It shouldn't be there. Can we go down to the next screen? We, I think, have talked about the bit about these 2 exceptions. As I said, I guess it's fine with me to add this kludge that I suggested in response to Damon's question about, again, a kind of unusual case, but it could say detached garages which are not providing required parking for the dwelling unit and do not have other electrical requirements are exempted. The rest of it is about trying to provide for charging in townhouses that do not have garages. And it basically tries to do this in a way that's consistent with the requirements for apartments more or less like that built under the IBC rather than under the IRC. It's got the same table that the IBC does, except that if you use the IBC's table for buildings like this that have got a small number of spaces, it seemed to me as if you ended up with more requirements for spaces than really was necessary. So I've put in something which is just specifies numbers for townhouses with 10 spaces or less, rather than applying the table to them. If you apply the table to some apartment that's got 5 townhouse apartments in it, you end up having to have 4 spaces that have got infrastructure because you're rounding up. So there's 1 EV charging station, there are 2 EV ready spaces, there's another EV capable space. And that seemed like a lot to me for a 5 apartment townhouse. So I've tried to do something that will kind of make it easier to think about that and not require quite as much in that exception. If we can keep going. The rest of this is just like the IBC. Keep going, Stein. Again, the conversation last time made me think that this thing about 335.4 was unnecessary. I've added a little illustrative comment to the exception about load management systems to try to make it clearer about exactly what we're talking about there. That you could put in a circuit with a 60 amp breaker. It would deliver 48 amps of continuous load. So you could serve 3 spaces with a minimum 16 amp requirement from one circuit like that if you had sharing software. And again, people seem to agree that the accessibility issues were already covered by other places in the IRC. So I took that out. That's the tour.
All right, thank you, Thad. Okay, with that, I am going to ask Dorian to scroll back up to the beginning, or Annette, who's ever controlling that, up to the beginning of the proposal, and we're going to open it to the floor for discussion on the proposed changes or the proposal overall.
I can't put my hand up, but a couple of comments. This is Ron, and sorry, I can't see the proposal, but the wording close proximity, is that still in the proposal?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, because the one I read this morning, read it over again, it said close proximity to, and that's a non-defined term, which makes it extremely subjective to anyone trying to do a field inspection or verification on the unit.
The
Oh,
close
yeah,
proximity,
it's,
the close proximity is still here.
It's in the IBC's language in the proposal that's been moved forward for public comment by the Code Council.
Yeah, and that's just I guess I would like to see that stricken if this goes ahead. I'm going to just speak right up from the beginning. This is not ready for prime time. It still has, I think, a lot of loose ends that need to be connected. And generally, too, when you're doing a code proposal as part of your justification, you don't go into the debate between fossil fuel and electric. That whole section, I think, should be eliminated from the proposal if it goes ahead. It's either, it's a code language and it's a discussion on that and not the philosophical and political discussion between the two fuels. So I am going to support a disapproval of this proposal at this time.
The only reason, just to respond to Ron's comments, the reason that the discussion about emissions is in there is that the Code Council has been required by the legislature to meet the state's policy goals about emissions reductions through additional changes to the code and besides what was specified by the legislature in 1287. So the state's policy is to reduce emissions. Electric vehicles are essential to reducing emissions. That's why that's there.
All right, thank you, Ron. Thank you, Thad, for the response. All right, still other questions or concerns on this proposal and changes? Go ahead, Damon.
I'm not 100% against this as long as it's simplified. If we just had 335.1 and 335.2 and stop there, then I think it's a pretty simple proposal that I might be inclined to support.
Okay, thank you, Damon. Others? Members of the public? Again, you can just jump in if you can't raise your hand. Okay.
Maybe, I don't know whether it's appropriate. Maybe we could proceed by stages, Micah. If we entertained a proposal to cut the ADU language and replace it with an exemption for ADUs, that would be one step. We could entertain a proposal to remove my particular exemption for townhouses with no garages and 10 spaces or less, and replace it with the exemption that's currently in the IBC for just exempting anything that's got 10 spaces or less from the requirement there. And then we could entertain a proposal for just basically doing what Damon would like to do, striking the rest of it, and see what people think about the different pieces of it.
Okay, Thad, that's a good suggestion. However, based on our time and schedule, I don't believe we're going to have enough time to sit here and rebuild the proposal to the entire tag's liking. I know there are a lot of holes in it that folks have concern with. I'll kind of share some of mine. Again, you have done a phenomenal amount of work in a short amount of time to make some modifications. However, I still, for me, don't believe it's enough. I do believe if we start at the definitions, these are similar definitions to the proposal that was before for the IBC. However, I believe we got rid of electric vehicle as a definition, and then electric vehicle charging station, since it is still an electric vehicle supply equipment. They were very similar. So we cut down on some of the definitions. Then for me, getting into the ADU requirement, I still don't believe ADUs are necessary here. Accessory dwelling unit is not a term that's used in the code except for one place, and that's talking about an accessory dwelling unit being placed within a two-family dwelling unit, or within a dwelling unit doesn't make it a two-family dwelling unit. It's not a defined term, it's a dwelling unit. I do agree with Damon there that if you want these for each dwelling unit, we need to just say for each dwelling unit. Moving further down, we get into a lot of, again, electrical code language, which it should not be in this section. We do have the residential code or electrical code that's, whether we point to the state language or whether you modify this and further down in the IRC, then that would be a path to take. Then again, I will parrot some of Ron's concerns. It's not clear where these are supposed to go, even if you're talking about garages, detached garages, electrical meters, electrical services, electrical requirements. My understanding is that a detached garage is, if there's electrical, it still needs to have some type of branch circuit supplied there. I'm not an electrician anymore, but I think there's just a lot of issues with this, and I agree with Ron that I don't think this is ready to move forward. I just think there's a lot can be done. If you do want to work on some modifications with Damon or some of the other tag members or some of the other members from the public, if this is disapproved, then you could do that between now and when it comes up at the BFP committee and further on in the process. But I have a lot of concerns with this, just as the way it's written and proposed currently. Even with the changes you brought in, I still think there's just so many questions that aren't answered in this code change. So that's my 2 cents. Again, we're still open for discussion. So if there's any additional discussion, now would be the time. Damon, go ahead. You put your hand back up, I believe.
I did. Mr. Chairman, I move disapproval of this proposal.
All right, we have a motion and we do have a second. I'm sorry, I cut off the second. Who made that second? Was that Annie?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second for disapproval of the proposal. Any additional discussion by the tag members? Hearing none. If there's any opposition to that motion, please say nay. Hearing none, that motion carries. Thad, thank you for your time and effort on this proposal. It is recommended for disapproval by the tag. Again, you can further modify that, bring it back up for discussion. Will be brought up for discussion at the BFP committee, but the tag is recommending disapproval for that this time. Again, thanks for your time and effort.
Thank you for taking the time to think about it. Take care.
Thanks, Thad. All right, we're going to move on to the second EV proposal, since we did try to make time to hear those together. So with that, we're going to move on to 091, I believe is the number, and Kathleen.
Hi, thank you, Micah. Thank you all very much for the opportunity to share this with you today. The modifications for this proposal were based on the feedback from the tag at the last meeting, and just to move very quickly through them. This section has been moved from 1905 to section 309 under garages and carports in the building plannings chapter. Modified the section title to reflect that the requirement now is only to add a dedicated circuit. We've deleted the EVSC definition because it's unnecessary. Ties the requirement to each dwelling unit versus each required parking space. Clarifies that the section applies to the construction of all new dwelling units under the scope of the IRC and their attached private garages and carports versus the confusion around potential would it apply to 1 and 2 family dwellings and attached private garages and carports of townhomes. It deletes the reference to the electrical code since the two codes aren't correlated and the EVSC definition has been deleted. It seems unnecessary. The one thing that I failed to add in this, which we could if we wanted to, and my apologies, it's didn't have the recording and I failed to document it, was to add the exception. I know that 2 exception items have been proposed, and I'm proposing that only 1 actually be added, and that's an exception for that electric vehicle charging infrastructure would not be required if there is no public utility or commercial power supply. I don't think the proposed item number 2, which was dwelling units without garages or other on-site parking, I don't know if it's necessary just because of the scope of the provision, but if you felt it is, that could be added as well. And thank you, Mike or whomever.
That's not me. I have terrible typing.
Well, thank you to somebody. Yeah, electric vehicle charging infrastructure is not required if
I will modify the exception. I'll make it the same.
Oh, thank you, Stan.
It appears in the building code. You're proposing the same exception, right?
Yes, please.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Kathleen. We have a hand up real quick from Damon, and then so we'll open the floor for discussion. Go ahead, Damon.
I'd like to go ahead and move approval of this provision and then also offer an amendment.
Okay, Damon, I'm going to ask if we hold off on your motion. That way we make sure we have allowance for the members of the public to discuss before we move on to the tag member discussion, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
Damon, can we hear your motion or your proposal revision?
Yeah, can we hear your exception change there, Damon?
Yeah, I was just going to simply ask if Stoyan would put in the 2 exceptions that I had listed in my brief from the last meeting.
So what you're proposing here, Damon, would be to bring over the exceptions as they are shown in the IBC proposal under consideration.
I believe that's correct.
Exception 2 is not really needed because the scoping clarifies that the provisions are for units with garages.
You are correct. Yep. So you could strike 2.
Okay.
So there, I just simplified your language as far as public utility or commercial power.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Damon, for that. Jen.
Hi, just a question. So if there is a new ADU being created, a new dwelling unit within an existing home, and the home has a garage already, would this apply in that case?
Technically, no, but if you wanted to add that provision, that would be fine.
Yeah, I just think it's a little unclear because it is construction of a new dwelling unit, but it doesn't have its own dedicated carport or garage. So I can see where that would be open to interpretation.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, if I can jump in here, I mean, the ADU, Micah mentioned it a few times that as a term, it's a dwelling unit. And if there is no garage for this dwelling unit, then it's outside of the scoping of this proposal. So do we need to exempt something that is not covered anyway?
So a single family home that already has a 2-car garage and then they create another dwelling unit within that home, does it not have a garage? Because it's not the use, right, of that garage may not be clear. Is it if the unit opens directly to the garage or not? You know, it's a new dwelling unit and there is an attached garage.
Yes, but the garage is already with the electric vehicle supply equipment. It's already provided. I understand that it may not be for the ADU, but if the ADU is sharing the same garage, I mean, it's already provided. This is how I see it.
Well, we have an existing house. It doesn't have any EV structure, infrastructure at all. It's built in 1985. And now we're constructing a new dwelling unit within it. And remember, the plans examiner is only going to have this language, not this conversation. So they're saying, yes, it's construction of a new dwelling unit. There is an attached private garage. It doesn't really clarify, does that garage directly serve? How do you even determine if that garage serves? Maybe the person who lives in the main house has one car, says, sure, park your car in the 2-car garage.
I will change my comment then. The garage is an existing garage. I agree that it allows interpretations, but I wouldn't apply this new requirement in the existing garage. Again, I'm not the proponent, sorry, Catherine. I was trying to simplify it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the conversation, and it's a good thing to be considering, Jen. So is there, and I can't remember on the fly because I've stepped away from the review scene for quite some time now, but are we using terms of primary or principal? So we could specify that this is the principal, if a principal dwelling unit or primary dwelling unit has been constructed and not a quote unquote afterward condition of a new dwelling unit to an existing wiring system. Or I think an amendment, or excuse me, an exception would be
or because we're saying the construction of a new dwelling unit, we're not saying new construction and then sort of addressing if one house is split into 2, whether that's an ADU or a duplex. So we don't use those terms of principal or primary elsewhere. So I think the construction of a new dwelling unit is different than new construction, right? Because that kind of, when we say new construction, we're thinking a new single family residence is going up. It's not, but construction of a new dwelling unit is different. That can be within that existing one.
Gotcha, thank you. So if we can change the text to clarify that it is new construction versus or by adding it to the list of exceptions. And I don't know the appropriate way to do this, Stoyan and Micah, but if it's for me to propose some text to you on the side, that's when I have time to figure out the best path.
I am showing Damon's idea, which seems logical for this conversation.
Gotcha. Then going back to the other section. Okay.
So it's up to the TAC members how they want to approach it. But
I think Damon's language kind of similar there. Why don't we process this a little bit while we listen to Thad's comments? Go ahead, Thad.
I just wondered whether your intention, if I put up a single family home and it has a detached garage, as I read the language, I'm not required to have any charging infrastructure. So I just wondered whether you actually want that attached private garages for that language, or
Yeah,
whether you want to drop attached.
no, attached is has been a thoughtful word there, just because. So for example, in unincorporated King County, you can have quite some distance between the garage structure and the primary residence. And so the cost of that infrastructure could be quite high. So keeping it simple, attached, cost low. And that's going to be more often than not the case, especially in the more urban areas, that they're going to be attached buildings versus detached, or at least in closer proximity.
Okay, thank you, Thad. Damon?
Yeah, I think, we're thinking about attached versus detached and ADUs being created within an existing structure. There's such a small percentage of the work that's out there. Adopting this proposal as it's written would pick up 99% of what we're trying to do. I guess my only concern is a detached ADU, which are becoming quite common, that doesn't have any parking near it. Well, then no, never mind, because that doesn't have an attached garage. So yeah, I like the language as written.
Okay, thanks, Damon. Jen, I'm going to come back to you. Do you have any suggestions on how to provide language on your concern? I understand your concern too, and I'm sitting here thinking, can we put served in each dwelling or something? I'm failing to come up with something as well.
I know. One thing that's really hard about this process is having to listen and read and try to think at the same time. I think that I know that we struck electrical vehicle supply equipment for new construction, but I do just think changing it to be somehow new construction instead of new dwelling units might help. But I also agree, it seems like a couple people have said it too, that this requirement being specific to dwelling units makes sense. So I think that would help. And then, but maybe also just dealing with it in the exceptions. I like some of those other exceptions that we were thinking about bringing over, and then maybe just clarifying it there, like that this does not apply to alterations where an accessory dwelling unit, it's really just the ADUs I'm worried about, because if you had a single family house and you decided to, build a duplex, add another unit, and it's a duplex and it has its own parking and garage, likely, right? Then it would need that. So yeah, that's where I'm going with it in my brain.
Okay. Thanks, Jen. Don't know if we have an answer, but Damon?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I left my hand up from previous.
Okay, no problem. And then Annie, you have your hand up?
So I think Jen's point is something that we should at least, spend a little bit of time on. I'm wondering, Jen, from the viewpoint that you have.
Well, we defeated one proposal already, so.
The word private, because if you've got a single family dwelling with a double car garage and they've decided to do an ADU within that building, so we're not doing new construction, but that garage is private for the main dwelling and that's all existing, could you, as a plans examiner or a building inspector, interpret it, well, that's private for the existing dwelling and therefore there is no requirement that you'd put your charging circuit in that existing garage?
No, because that's typically to distinguish it from a public or a commercial garage, so it's not private to that residence necessarily, because even if you live in a townhouse that maybe had underground parking, that would still be a private garage that all the residents are using. But I like where you're going of like, this garage serves this unit. Again, those ADUs are the really tricky ones because they can be obviously not served by that, but the way that they're, they can be attached to the garage, but don't have an opening directly into it. But even the primary house, primary dwelling unit there doesn't require that. You might have to walk all the way around. So, but if the way this is written, and I do get lots of permits, I don't think there's some kind of odd one out. I get a lot of permits to create an accessory dwelling unit. The way this is written, you are creating construction of a new dwelling unit, and there is an attached garage to the house. I would require it, but I would say I don't really think that's what they wanted, but that's what it says. And we have to enforce what the code says, especially again, if they weren't privy to this whole conversation, they're only going to get the text. And then they go, wait, but does that apply to this?
Could we just add an exception that says except existing garages?
Yeah, I think that would do it.
And existing garages and carports?
If I could
Yeah,
jump
I think
in,
that would do it.
yeah, well, the problem is that we're applying this to the dwelling unit that has a garage or carport. So we can't, I would recommend saying an exception, dwelling units added to existing structures built prior to this code. Does that work?
It could, I guess for me, I mean, I do understand the concern. However, and Kathleen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, isn't the intent to provide this infrastructure for all new dwelling units? And I guess honestly, whether or not the private garage or carport's used by the existing dwelling unit or the new dwelling unit, it seems like the infrastructure should be provided. That's my 2 cents. Maybe that's going a step too far, but yeah.
If you are doing a conversion or an addition that's to an existing dwelling, you're clearly digging into the panel, right? So you're going to be opening up the electrical anyways. So to add the circuit is not the worst thing in the world.
Right. And then I do have a question on 309.6.1. Just on the terminology, when we look at some of the definitions in the electrical code or even the residential portion of the electrical information in the residential portion of the residential code, I'm not sure where you want this circuit to be. It says you shall provide a minimum of this dedicated 40 amp branch circuit, and it shall be installed in the electrical panel. So to me, if I read that, I would be confused as whether or not I have to provide a branch circuit going somewhere, or if I just have to provide a 40 amp overcurrent device in the existing panel or new panel.
Okay, not having the electrical background, this was the suggested language that I add. So, and Mike, I know that you do have some background in this. What do you feel would be appropriate? And Damon, you as well.
I mean, Damon's probably more up to date on this, but branch circuit is one thing and the service panel is another. And what this indicates is that you're installing a branch circuit in the service panel. Is how that reads to me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I read it the same way. Okay. You could say branch circuit terminating in a junction box adjacent to the panel. Now it's accessible. Because otherwise I could just put a 40 amp breaker in and be done with it.
Don't you want it somewhere near the parking space though?
Yes. I'm imagining that most panels are already in garages. So, but that's not the case every time.
The branch circuit, the term branch circuit is defined in the electrical code, and it includes the breaker and the reciprocal outlet, or if we clarify, junction box, that's okay too. But
Okay, and the only reason I've hesitated to do anything beyond a junction box is because I've seen 3 different styles of plugins and even hardwired charging circuits, or charging devices. So I didn't want to limit people to that. Not to say that you couldn't change the outlet out to adapt to your equipment. But if branch circuit does include a termination outside the panel, then I think we're fine.
I'm sorry, what would that text be then?
We wouldn't need to add anything if Soyan's correct that a branch circuit does leave the panel to a destination.
Well, in order to be complete, the branch circuit shall terminate somewhere. You know, it originates from the service panel, and it shall terminate somewhere. I can't remember how the termination was addressed in the National Electrical Code, and I don't have it now, but I can, you know, if there is something that needs to be clarified, I can work with Kathleen and we can make some editorial modifications for the BFP committee if the proposal is approved.
Okay, thank you, Stoyan. Thank you, everybody.
I like the way that you framed it, Micah, that yeah, some newly created accessory dwelling units may indeed require this, and that's fine. So I'm good with just leaving the language as it is. But for exception 1, we do not need to repeat electrical vehicle charging infrastructure is not required because we're already saying that. So I would just recommend kind of not duplicating that, and then we don't need exception number 2, I don't think.
Okay.
So if we don't need exception 2, I will delete the charging language and we'll have this. Oops, sorry. Is that better?
Looks good to me.
Okay.
You could actually say electric vehicle infrastructure where no public utility or commercial power. The exceptions already are not required.
Electric vehicle infrastructure.
Where there is no.
Like that?
I think that reads correct.
Well, it reads some kind of odd for me, but English is my second language, so I'll pass it.
John, go ahead. John will correct me.
Yeah, I agree with you, Stoyan. And English is my first language. If you're going to shorten it that much, you get rid of the electrical vehicle charging infrastructure and start with where. Yeah, and personally, I prefer full, complete sentences in exceptions. So that's my style.
Okay, fine.
So say again, I missed.
Well, you got 2 choices. One is to leave it as you've shown here as a complete sentence, which is my preference personally. The other option would be to delete from the first word all the way through if and then put where. That's the kind of normal style. That's starting to grow more in the code. So you would delete everything all the way up through if.
Okay, so other tech members, which one? I mean,
show that one that John's talking about. I think John would be more accurate.
Yeah.
The short version?
Yeah, the short version is just replace all of that with where.
Like that? Okay.
Yes.
I like that one better. I think the clause that you deleted that talked about infrastructure could imply possibly something more than just a circuit, because this provision or this code section only is talking about a dedicated circuit. I wouldn't want it to imply more infrastructure than a dedicated circuit. And if we just delete that language, there's not a conflict.
Okay. Stoyan, we really need to have a chat function in this Zoom. That way I can post language. There is language that talks about the branch circuit termination in the IBC proposal that I think would be really clear and provide the information needed in 309.6.1. Is there a way you can pull that language up, or I guess I can email you what I'm thinking real fast. Not what I'm thinking, but what's in that proposal. It would clean up the issue that I'm having with that language that talks about the branch circuit in the electrical panel. I just sent that without a subject, so you should get it relatively quickly.
And I'm not in California anymore, so it will arrive faster. Okay. Short term. Okay, got it.
I think that also clears up Damon's concern or question on if it's not going to go to a charging equipment, then it shall terminate at a receptacle or junction box. Oh, I think I sent you the whole thing. You only need the one sentence, not the two. Screwed up there, Stoyan, sorry. You can eliminate the last sentence of that, Stoyan. We're not doing conduit and spare cable.
Okay.
Does that solve that issue for, I know it solved it for me.
Yep, I like that.
Should we specify, 'cause it's been brought up a couple times, you know, how close it is to the parking or where it is? Or are we just gonna leave that alone and that'll be up to the inspector and interpretation? Sometimes leaving things vague is actually more helpful because then you can make a more case by case basis. Sometimes it's not.
I think the electrical code will address some of this because it allows, I think it was up to 25 feet length of the cable if we have wired in place charger. And I think the same requirement applies to the portable chargers as well, but it is a personal opinion.
All right, thanks, Stoyan. Hopefully that answers the question. John, you had your hand up real quick.
Yeah, well, I think Stoyan addressed it. If you wanted to put some language in you could use instead of close proximity, which was in I think the previous proposal, language similar to smoke alarms, which would be in the immediate vicinity of. If you want to throw something in there, I'm not arguing one way or the other, but if you want language, that would be a possibility.
All right. Thanks, John. There's a possibility. Jen, go ahead. You have your hand up.
Yeah, and then we have the acronym EV, but I don't think we've actually spelled it out anywhere else. So can we just say electrical vehicle instead of EV?
Absolutely. Right. Go back down, Stoyan.
I was checking the definitions.
I think we get rid of all of them. So you can just spell out electric vehicle charging equipment in that last portion. Is that what you're getting, Jen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I do like the open part of how far it can be. You know, I think it comes down to the charging equipment. Some of us got longer cabling, some of us got shorter. You know, I think we do need to leave that open. It would be my preference. Okay. We do have some additional language changed and modified here. Does the proponent have any thoughts or additional input to those modifications if we look for a motion?
These look great, and I agree that we should keep the proximity loose just because it's going to be, you know, parking spaces are finite and they will figure it out if it's new constructions.
Okay. Thank you, Kathleen. All right, any additional discussion on this item at this time from members of the public?
Just a quick question regarding the exception. We had in Thad's proposal a reference to on the premises. Is there value there or having that clause in there or not?
Maybe you could explain your thinking on that.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of how it was couched in the prior proposal where it was an issue and we wanted to see that versus here.
My understanding of the previous, this is that, of the previous discussion was that it came up in relation to questions about, well, suppose we have power to the parcel, we're out in the country, but we don't have power to the garage, then do we have to do something? So I don't think it's probably an issue in relation to the language that we're talking about here.
Okay, thank you, Thad. I appreciate that recollection. That is correct. So it's not an issue here.
Yes, thank you, Thad. Appreciate that. Good question, Annie. Thanks. All right, I will entertain a motion from the tag. Damon?
I move approval as amended.
Okay.
I second.
All right, thank you, Jen. We have a motion and a second for approval, the recommendation of approval as amended or modified. Any additional discussion from the tag members? All right, if there's any opposition to that motion, please say nay. Hearing none, motion carries. Unless somebody came off. Ron, were you coming off mute? All right, I must say motion carries. I appreciate your time on this, Kathleen. Thanks everyone for their input on the modifications. We will move on to the next proposal on the list.
Number 43.
Okay.
And Micah, that was the one that you sent me this morning, right?
Yes.
Actually, it was 1 minute before 10.
Well, you know, it's still this morning. Sorry, Stoyan.
That's correct. Yeah. Okay. I need to. Was it a Word document or?
Yes.
No, I think it was that one.
Oh, it was a PDF. Is that 43? Hold on, I gotta open 43 to see what it is. No, that is not it.
No.
Nope.
This is what you sent me. I think.
I sent you another one though. That one is for 40. Which one? Oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. Okay. Too many emails, Stoyan.
Right here, 43. Found it.
Okay. All right, I'm not sure if Quinn is on today, and
so for 43, the recommendation was needs renumbering tabled for WABO to look at rewriting it to address some concerns on types of use.
Okay.
And I can show the original one.
That'd be great.
All right, here is the original one. And I'll try to show them both. I hope I'll succeed, but okay.
There's changes.
Can you see that?
Yes. I'm not sure I sent you the correct one, Stoyan. Actually, I did
They look the same though.
Yeah, they look the same. Let's table this one, Stoyan, and I gotta verify what I said, at least till the end of, closer to the end of the meeting. I will find out what I did or did not send you. I apologize. I gotta check with what Quinn had. So with that, sorry, folks.
So now we're going on number 92.
Okay, great. Kinley.
Yeah, thank you. So based on the discussion and recommendations that were made at the last TAG meeting, and we went through and made some revisions. First one was to change references to code to references to section. Next, we had under the scope, we had building construction. And the recommendation was to change that to buildings and structures. So we did that and then made the language compatible there. The work area, we added the word with. So now it says having a work area greater than 750 square feet or with a project value greater than $75,000. So that's more of a grammatical change. You can keep scrolling down. Then under salvage assessment, there was some discussion over primarily over the term affidavit, and we talked about changing that. And looking at it more and working with Kathleen, we were thinking that it made sense just to remove it from this part in the definitions. And then on the forms, we just added a line for the owner or owner's representative to sign. We didn't figure that it needed explicit explanation here. Then under waste diversion report, there was questions about having certificate of occupancy. Some jurisdictions go more with a final inspection, and the recommendation had been to add that it be allowed to just be at approval of final inspection. So we added that language also. Go ahead and scroll down.
This is all I have.
That's it. Okay. Yeah. Any questions?
This is in the rational, I think. And I will use the opportunity here. So some of these proposals are modified by the technical advisory group or by the proponent. And I will do my best to track the changes, but if the proponents can send me an updated version of the rationale, because sometimes it changes the regulatory effect. So
okay,
it's not specific to this proposal though, but I forgot to mention it before.
Okay. Yep, we can send you the new copy of the rationale.
And for this particular one, here is the change only at the rationale, nothing else.
Yeah.
Okay. Any discussion on this proposal as we're processing it?
Kinley, are the forms that you've attached to the end of this proposal something that you're expecting to see, or can a jurisdiction modify as they feel necessary should they decide to adopt this appendix?
I think that is a question for the tag. I'm not, since they are included in the proposal, and they would be included in the, my understanding is they would be included in the code. The jurisdictions wouldn't be able to make modifications to it, but I may be incorrect in that.
The forms, I'm sorry, I misled you a little bit or a lot. The forms are attached to the proposal.
And, yeah, you can see there where we added the signature lines. Also.
Yes.
And then I can just suggest that change real quickly. The permitting jurisdiction, we didn't think that needed to be in there because each individual jurisdiction is going to be the one handling the form. The permit number is there above already. And then the square footage of the structure will be addressed in the proposal section. This is the waste management report or waste material diversion report, so it's not necessary here. Another signature line.
Good question. So those are included in the appendix, should we approve this? Okay.
So if they're included as part of the proposal, then, you know, it should be approved as a whole, the proposal and the forms.
Okay. Thank you, Stoyan. All right, Heather, you have your hand up.
Yeah, hi, everybody. Heather Trim with Zero Waste Washington. This is my first meeting, so I wasn't quite sure the procedure, and I'm sorry I've missed previous ones on this topic. We are very, very much in support of this proposal, and I really don't have any dramatic comments, except that on the form, I couldn't tell if it said the word other at the very bottom, because there are going to be oddball things that could be there, way down. Under miscellaneous, like, after that, maybe the word other, because there could be oddball things. That's a very minor comment. Anyway, overall, super supportive and hope you'll vote yes.
All right, thank you, Heather. I think that could be a good addition. How about you, Kinley?
Yep. Yeah, if we can add that now, that'd be great.
Okay, I'll open the floor for discussion from anyone else. Aaron, you have your hand up?
Hey there. I too am kind of jumping in late and haven't been to the other meeting, so I really appreciate all the hard work you guys have done on this. And forgive me if this is just already common knowledge, and Kinley probably already knows the stuff I'm about to ask about. But as far as salvage assessment, salvage verifiers rather, is there going to be a similar process as they have in Seattle with salvage verification? And I think the nice thing they did with that is have the salvage verifiers get emailed when their company name is used. Is it, if you could just tell me, Kinley, how similar is it going to be to the Seattle one, just so for my information? Thank you.
Yeah, the Seattle one has been set up kind of as a demonstration. The system that Seattle is using is not going to be required. It's kind of going to be up to each jurisdiction to figure out how they want to work that. That said, I have been working with Build Reuse, the National Building Material Reuse Association, to develop a salvage verifier training. It's going to be primarily web-based, and so that will be something that to make it easier for jurisdictions to adopt something that would add support to this. But it's not necessary for this code as it is.
Gotcha. So are there salvage verifiers at this point, or is this just to be verified by the applicant?
I believe we have it to be verified by the applicant at this point.
Okay, well, as that develops, I hope we can be kept in the loop, because Earthwise Salvage would like to be a salvage verifier for City of Tacoma, and I think it works really well when there's people that can show that they, have a yard, have a crew, have the ability to actually conduct salvage operations and get this material to the public, versus someone who just says, yeah, there's some salvage stuff here, but doesn't have the means to actually make it available for reuse in a project for an end use.
Awesome. Yeah, we recognize that there aren't a whole lot of salvage companies around the state yet. There are some in various areas, and this is kind of a first step to help build the building blocks to move that industry forward across the state.
That's great. Yeah, Earthwise fully supports this, and thanks as always, Kinley, for your hard work on this.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Kinley. All right, any additional discussions on this proposal?
I had one slight change to the revision that we just made down on the form. I think maybe it'd be best if the other were moved to the next column over to the left. That way, whoever's filling out the form could write what the other is in that column. Minor change.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it the right place you asked for?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. And Stoyan, could you give us a little brief informational just for the tag before we vote on whether to approve or disapprove this, on where or how the appendix would function for the state and individual jurisdictions? That way they get a refresher.
Well, it depends what is the approach, what the TAC will recommend. Because as far as I see this, is it an appendix? Well, two options: appendix that will be adopted by the council and then it will be mandatory for all jurisdictions, or appendix that will be added to the residential code, but it will be adopted only if adopted by a local ordinance. Is it? I'm not sure what is the intent, so I'm sorry if I'm not answering your question, but
I muted myself as I began to speak. That is the question that I am asking. So that way the tag knows what the recommendation would be. And we would have to make that decision. The recommendation for the motion would be that the state adopts this appendix and it is mandatory to be enforced like the rest of the code, or we have a choice to adopt this appendix with it being optional for each jurisdiction to approve. And it looks like the intent is an optional appendix, as the proponent is showing in their reason statement. Is that correct, Kenley?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That was our understanding with an appendix, is that it was optional for jurisdictions.
Perfect. So if we do make a motion to approve this, we will go with what the recommendation is by the proponent, unless someone states otherwise. So thank you, Storian. That is a clarification I needed. With that, I will open the floor to a motion.
I'll just speak up here and say that it was my understanding that this was, from the last conversation that we had, I thought this was supposed to be mandatory because it's only really requiring the reporting. It's not really requiring a certain amount of materials be salvaged or anything. And by then introducing the concept of just reporting it by the very nature of it seems to change people's behaviors, so they do salvage more and recycle more materials. So if it's optional, every jurisdiction, you know, already is sort of trying or not trying to do green building stuff, right? Through usually like the land use side of things. So if it's optional, I almost don't understand the point of it, I guess is my question.
Okay. Question, Jen. I think for me, when it's optional, it just gives a framework for jurisdictions to not have to create these type of code language or forms or anything else. It just says we can adopt this and use it without much staff time or staff effort, or maybe they don't have staff that can evaluate this type of work. And so this provides a framework for them just to adopt something without having to have specialized staff to create something.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
That's very helpful.
Yeah, that was the intent.
Excellent, thanks, Kinley. All right, any other questions? Again, I will entertain a motion for approval or disapproval of this proposal. And I can't make it myself. All right.
Micah, this is Todd Short. Is there another one that we have to consider, or we're just acting on this one and?
We're going to act on each one individually. There is another Appendix W for deconstruction. I think they're similar, but they are still different proposals.
Yeah, I would just throw out that the two proposals are not conflicting at all. They're complementary, if anything, and they're both meant to ideally move forward in compatibility with each other, but one can move forward without the other.
Correct.
That's not a replacement question.
Okay, thank you.
Good question, Todd. So that means you're going to make a motion for us, Todd?
Can I add something here? So here is how it works with the appendices. So currently we have Appendix F, Appendix Q, Appendix U that are adopted by the state Building Code Council. So when a local jurisdiction wants to adopt this by a local ordinance, they don't need approval by the council. Will be something similar with these two new appendices.
Excellent. Thank you, Stoyan. All right, Tag. Motion, please. Approve or disapprove?
All right, I'll jump start it. This is Todd. I move to approve this proposal
As modified?
as modified.
Thank you, Todd. Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you very much, Jen. Okay. Any additional discussion from the tag? Great. Hearing none. If there's any opposition to the motion, we approve this as modified, please say nay. Hearing none, motion carries for recommendation as approved as modified to the BFP committee. Moving on to item 093. Thank you, Kinley. Sorry, I will try to, we got to move this along. We're gonna run out of time. Gonna stay late. All right. Next one on the list is 093. And that's Appendix W for deconstruction. Kathleen.
Thank you so much, Micah. And hello, everybody. Again, I'm Kathleen Petrie, King County. And so the modifications based on the feedback that were made to this appendix, optional appendix, is that we actually just switched the name of it so there wasn't any confusion. This appendix is separate and distinct from the appendix that was just presented by Kinley Deller. Also, a reference has been added back to R602111 to create that clear link between the deconstruction and having all of those materials and the possibility to reuse them. So R602111 increases the allowance of reused use on lumber. We've changed the term code with section and added the words and structures to buildings and structures. So everything now is building and structures because there was some discussion about what about garages or, detached garages or other accessory buildings that could fall in the 750 square foot or more threshold. Why wouldn't we deconstruct those as well? That's great. And then we put the responsibility of whether the building is considered unsafe or if the material is not suitable on the engineer of record, and we've taken that responsibility away from the building official. And those are the changes that were made in this. Thank you very much. We appreciate your feedback from the last round.
Thank you, Kathleen. All right, I'll open the floor for discussion. Go ahead, John.
Just one minor technical wording. Would suggest replacing may with let's see, is permitted to be reused, just for consistency in language.
Thank you, John.
I agree with that. Historian, do you know where that change needs to occur? Do you see it?
Can you say again? I got distracted.
In the second line at the very end, there's the word may. Second line of 101.1.
Oh, 101.1. Okay, sorry.
Yep.
Right here.
Place it with is permitted to.
Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, Stoyan. Any additional discussion or thoughts on this additional? Go ahead, Ron.
I'm having a brain burp here, but does this one also have the affidavit form in it?
It does not. This one doesn't technically require the forms. However, they can and could be used in conjunction if both appendices are adopted. So once, the forms would document what of these materials were recycled, salvaged, and or sent to a landfill once the building's deconstructed.
Thank you.
Okay.
In 101.1 purpose, second line, or I guess it's, yeah, second line, the new text, does the word used actually need to be in there? Can you just say salvaged sawn lumber rather than salvaged used sawn lumber? Would it communicate the same thing?
Yeah, thank you, Annie. I'll have to go back and check. I believe the title of that section was used sawn lumber, which is why I put that in there, but I can confirm. I can confirm that.
Okay, thank you. I have a correlation question for Stoyan. If we approve both of these Appendix W items, they have different scope and purpose language. Will we just make this a different appendix number?
Well, I thought it should be a different appendix number. So the section numbers were changed to X, but the
Okay,
that one needs to be
perfect. That was it. Okay. Thank you for that. All right. Any additional items of concern through this proposal? And just to clarify, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was say overall, I like it. I'm just, I appreciated Annie's point. So now I'm overthinking that whole does that whole sentence even need to be there? Because this is about the demo. This is, do we really need to say that the materials that are going to be salvaged can be reused? Because isn't that the point of the salvage? And they're not, they may not have a building project as part of the demo. I just wonder if we can strike that whole sentence. But if it's helpful to have it here to just like drive home a point and make it clear, I'm happy to leave it as long as we, yeah, I think salvaged and used is redundant.
Yeah, you could remove the salvage term and just capitalize the U in used. That would replicate the title of 602.1. And agreed, Jen, it was just suggested language, whether or not it would merely be referencing, it would be a pointer.
Just to clarify for people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Good point. Thank you. All right. I will entertain a motion on this Appendix X. That's what we're changing it to.
I move to approve as amended.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Todd. All right. We have a motion to approve as modified. Any additional discussion from TAG members? Hearing none. If there's any opposition to this motion, please say nay.
Nay.
Thank you, Annie. All right. With that, we have one in opposition. Motion still carries. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, Tag. We will move on to item 09. Oh, it's so small on the screen. I don't know. 099 lofts. And when that comes up, we will turn the time over to John.
Hello, thank you. So there are this revision makes two editorial fixes, corrects a couple errors, and makes one substantive change. So the first error we needed to fix was actually in R326.4, the loft area. We had a typo on the section, should be P2904, so we fixed that. The next change was in R325.1. We referred to group R occupancies, and that was because that's a cut and paste error. That was from our IBC proposal, and since there are no occupancies in the IRC, that's not necessary. And but the substantive change is down in R314.3. So I could continue to scroll down, please. There you go. Thank you. So originally, well, the current language in the IRC Washington State version talks about you put a smoke alarm in sleeping lofts. Based on discussions at the national level, we are proposing now to say it's got to be somewhere near essentially it's got to be somewhere near the loft. And there were a couple comments we made about that. The highlighted part in number 2 is because our original language, our original proposal actually changed the language in number 2 to say it was going to the immediate vicinity of sleeping lofts and bedrooms. We got some comments that might allow the smoke alarm to be outside the bedroom if the sleeping loft were located inside a bedroom. So that was definitely not our intent. So we've created a new item 6. Essentially, well, what it says is that the smoke alarm for the loft needs to be within the same room. So within the room that the loft opens into. The requirement is that the loft be open, so it's going to open into some kind of room. It's got to be somewhere in that room. And then, as we were discussing this, someone asked the question: well, if you got a really big room, can that smoke alarm be located like at the far end of the room? And the intent is no, it should be somewhere close to it. So we do use language that's already in the code, kind of what I suggested earlier in one of the earlier items we were discussing this morning, is that the smoke alarm has to be in the immediate vicinity of the loft. Give some freedom for interpretation and some flexibility for locating it. The intent is it be somewhere close by, so it obviously alerts the occupants of the loft. So those are the changes that we are proposing in this particular revision, and I did highlight down below in the reason statement the reasons for these changes. Yeah, keep on scrolling down. I did what you asked. I anticipated your request, Stoyan, and have provided the revised reason statement there.
Which I really appreciate.
Yeah. So that's the extent of the change, and hope the tag will support this.
Excellent. Thank you, John. All right. Any questions or comments from the public on the proposal or the changes? We can scroll up to some of the changes if you'd like, Stoyan, or if folks want to read the reason statement, that's fine as well. So I'll open the floor to discussion for anyone.
Micah, this is Todd. Could you, I'm sorry, I mean, I know we went over this and we kind of focused in on the smoke alarm change, but what's driving this in the first place?
What's driving this is that we are seeing these being proposed already all over the place. And it's allowed in the tiny home provision. It's actually sleeping lofts were a code change we made in the last cycle. So it is actually already in the IRC. This expansion is, again, just allowing, making a lot of what we're doing here is making consistent with what we did propose for the IBC. The IBC already has very similar provisions. We've made some tweaks because of the national code hearings. So they won't be an exact alignment, but the concepts are all the same. The major the major pieces are all there. I think just some of the language is going to be slightly different between the two. So a lot of what we're doing here is aligning the IRC with what's already allowed in the IBC. But the idea is that what we're getting are small, well, in Seattle, what we were seeing is small units, and then they want to use the space, what space they have. They have high ceiling above a bathroom, say. And so they'll put a floor on this, some floor structure on top of the bathroom, and then they'll put a loft up there, and they want people to be able to use it. It provides a little bit of extra space. And as part of our IBC proposal for the, well, actually our IRC, excuse me, proposal for the national, we actually got some pictures from a jurisdiction in the east part of the state showing one of these inside a single family dwelling. And with provision, some of the things that they built were not according to what we would have had here. And so what we're trying to do is provide uniform, regulations across the state for how these things make sure they're safe.
Yep.
Thanks, John. In the national IRC, fire sprinklers are required. Or is there any consideration for, and in the IBC, residential occupancies have fire sprinklers? This, of course, in the state of Washington doesn't necessarily going to involve these in fire sprinkled units.
Let's see, where does that go? Well, again, you're right now in the IRC within the state, you're allowed to have mezzanines and things like that. This is just to me, this is a miniature mezzanine. And we provided actually more safety than you do for a mezzanine. Mezzanine can be used, doesn't have to have the smoke alarms and some of the other things. Right. So to us, it's very similar. And Mike, you can add.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add to that a little bit, Todd, especially on the history. So the sleeping lofts are in the state code, and that was based off the legislative directive to do something for tiny houses or something that can be used by small dwelling units. Of course, when we started that work, we determined that this should be allowed for any dwelling unit because you could already build or construct small spaces that were already smaller than the 400 square foot. You could construct small dwelling units that were smaller than the 400 square feet in the Appendix Q allowance. So that's kind of how this came about, the previous code cycle. And really, to me, this is somewhat an expansion of that, a cleanup, a overall better language that gets or takes into account a lot of other sections of code and other things, especially based on some of the designs that folks are starting to see and have questions. And this is really, some of it's really a cleanup for that as well.
Yeah.
So,
and Todd, just to say at the national level, a lot of people understand that states have been amending out or whatever the sprinkler provisions, and we have gotten support from fire service folks on this, even understanding that. So I'm hoping that kind of, they understand. Again, these are small spaces. They don't add that much. They're not, because they're open and we have these smoke alarms, you get the early warning and everything else you do in a typical bedroom or anything else. So we believe that this still provides adequate safety.
And John, just so that I understand fully, because you mentioned something about being built up on a bathroom. These lofts would have to be inside a bedroom. Is that correct?
No, they can open up into any kind of room.
So then where is the escape window?
There's different interpretations on that. Some people say that if it opens into a bedroom, it becomes part of the bedroom. And therefore you'll have the EERO. The other interpretation is that once you open if it is used for sleeping, once it opens into the room, that other room also becomes a sleeping room, and so it'll have an EERO as well. That's what we've heard. We've gotten conflicting direction from fire service folks at the national level, where one person has said you really should get EEROs. Another person and these are both prominent folks in the fire service in the code development arena. The other person did say, nah, you don't need it. It's part of the same room. You'll get it. So we have not elected to do that for the state version here. if the tag feels, wants to tell us to put an EERO in the room, we can certainly we can put language in to do that.
Okay, thank you, John. A little more to that, I think one of the things we need to point out is this is no longer called a sleeping loft, Todd. It is just a loft, so it can be used for any purpose. But we're adding additional safety measures because we know folks could use it for sleeping if they so choose, even though that, you know, we won't get those same measures if somebody wants to use their sleep or their living room as a sleeping room. So again, this kind of finds that good balance. And I'll move over to Jen. I see your hand up. Thanks.
I have the same concern, and I know that with the tiny homes that there's an option to put in the emergency escape roof opening. So in configurations that allowed for that, maybe requiring that, or so are we saying that anytime somebody creates a sleeping loft, then the nature of that room becomes a sleeping room and it is going to require it? So if I had a home theater room with a high ceiling and I put a sleeping loft in, but it had no windows or any openings, no doors because it was trying to be a dark theater room, do I then have to put in an emergency escape opening in the room because the sleeping loft is in it now?
I'll say that was going to depend on your interpretation. Again, we've had in our discussions, we've had various interpretations of that. People have said you should do this because this is how we interpret it, or you should do this other thing because we interpret it this other way.
Correct. Storian, can you scroll up to the beginning of the proposal as well? As again, I mentioned, this is not a sleeping loft. This is just classified as a loft. And I agree with John, it's an interpretation issue. If this is designated as a sleeping area on your plans, then you would have to treat it as such.
Where do you want me to go here?
Yep, right there. That's perfect. Just showing the definition of what this is a loft.
Yeah, scroll up to the definition if you would, please, and that probably
I think
would remind people. There you go. Again, it's just a mini mezzanine, and if it's used for an office, then and that's some of the argument we got from home builders, quite frankly, at the national level was, well, what if it's not a sleeping area? Why do I have to do all this extra stuff, right? So we're trying to walk that fine line here. So again, to me, this is just a mini mezzanine. Mezzanines don't always require sleeping lofts, sorry, EEROs. And so if I have a storage loft or an office in this area, why should I have to put an EERO in there? That's the question that comes up. And lofts, by the way, is not new to the code. The loft by itself, at least the national code, something it's an undefined term, and so we're helping in this process to actually define what it is and differentiate it somewhat from mezzanines. It's a subset of mezzanines in my mind. Other people want to keep it separate, but again, not every mezzanine has to do all these things. And so for these small lofts, again, we're putting in extra things that might not be required for some other mezzanines. And yeah.
Okay. Thanks, John. Thanks for the question, Jen.
This is Todd again. Why wouldn't we create two different definitions and call one a sleeping loft and the other just a loft?
Complications.
Yeah. that would provide clarity. Now you're liable to get anything. We're liable to come up to a home that has anything with anything happening in there. And I think the whole idea with the escape windows is that that's defined. I think, Micah, you said if it's a sleeping area, it's going to have what is required for sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like we're just, I don't know. I'm not sure we're achieving what you're out to achieve.
I think we are, because we are getting more flexibility for design, which is what we were after here.
Right.
And
With-
and
with getting-
we're seeing these quite often, and it's not just in Seattle. And I think Todd kind of again, if the tag wants to recommend we put in EEROs, that's something we can certainly follow up on, and we can do that. That would mean again requiring probably an EERO in every single one of these, because we don't want to have an argument, you know, one way or the other about is it sleeping or not. I mean, either it's okay as is, or you know, I don't know. Maybe I'm not arguing this coherently because I'm trying to think and talk at the same time, which is dangerous.
I do.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I do know we did get pushback on the requirement of having the EERO coming out of one of these, like the roof ones that Jen mentioned. They just said, you know, sometimes the roofs are too big. It came down to what is the balance with this proposal. We are getting additional safety measures that you would not get in like John mentioned, another type of loft or a small mezzanine. You don't get some of these where you're getting a smoke alarm or detector or anything else like that. It comes down to, you know, what's the balance, and this provides that good balance.
Yeah, and again, these are small areas. I mean, this is not like a huge separate room. All of these have to be, they can't meet the dimensions of habitable space. If you're over 70 square feet, you get pushed, you don't get to use this. If you're, you know, got a high ceiling above this, you don't get to use this. So that I think that's one of the key things.
Right. Agreed. Very, very limiting. Or very
Just to
limited.
clarify, I think the only time the roof access opening is explicitly required is in a tiny home. There's no other part of the code that was also amended when that definition was added to point back to it. So currently the sleeping loft just requires that it's, like you said, it's up to your interpretation. It's considered a sleeping room, needs something, could be the roof access, could be a normal window or door. And, you know, we do also have other spaces like the home theater, the office that doesn't, so it looks like a bedroom, but there's no closet. So we don't call it a bedroom. Or there's, you know, the game room above the garage, kind of rec room area. And we, you know, are they ever used as sleeping rooms? Yeah, they are, but they're not a sleeping room. So we can't require the smoke alarm, and we don't have an emergency escape opening in them.
Right. And this will allow the smoke alarm. One of the things I do want to point out, Jen, on the WAC 51 Appendix Q, we did, the state did strike that language that talks about the EERO, even in the tiny house, the roof opening one. So we did try to bring that into the IRC. However, again, that's the concern we've been hearing, is that that's not feasible in a lot of these.
Yeah. I mean, the roof, actually our, well, I don't know what the actual WAC says. I'm looking at the ICC published version of the Washington Code, and we do have a requirement for EERO. It should be an EERO. It says emergency roof access window in each sleeping loft. That's kind of what the current code says, which is not feasible in many places. Put that you know, put that media room below grade, and you're not going to put that loft not on the exterior wall, and you won't be able to put a roof window in there or EERO. So
right.
I mean, again, you know, if that's the only issue that the tag wants to tell us to solve, then we will certainly solve that for BFP.
So John, this is Todd again. Can you, and sorry, I didn't see this on the agenda as it went out, or I would have been better prepared. But so these lofts have to be in a habitable space. Is that correct?
Well, they have to open into a room or space.
If you
I
say
guess
no,
what-
I'm gonna be against this, but. So this couldn't be in an unfinished basement and have a loft constructed within it, or,
You'd have to have all the other things associated with this there. Does it have to be finished space? I will say we had not anticipated that here.
so the essence of what you were trying to achieve was a smoke alarm in each of these or near the vicinity of each of these where they weren't already required.
Right.
So a bonus room, a den or office, et cetera.
Right. Plus, you get some additional safety for people climbing in and out of these, but yeah.
Okay, well, I have concerns, but.
Okay, so okay. The other thing, Todd, I will say is that if we, well, okay, maybe it's not a great argument, but if we don't approve this for the IRC will be inconsistent with the IBC. You'll be allowed to do more in the IBC than you will in the IRC. So.
This is what I was going to clarify as well. The proposal was approved and it was adopted in IBC. And the other thing is proposal 99, it's been on the website for more than a week. So it was available for review.
Okay.
Well, let me again say in the IBC, that's a sprinkled structure. I think that's a very, very significant difference.
But we were allowing sleeping lofts before in
Right.
the previous we are allowing them now, excuse me, in the 2018 code without sprinklers.
That's
And
good.
you made reference to tiny homes. Is it in the IRC?
Yes, Todd, currently the sleeping loft is in the Washington IRC.
Yeah, it's section R327 in the Washington State IRC.
Right. And this proposal will clean that up and make some changes and take it from sleeping lofts to just lofts and capture the issues and problems that we are hearing are coming from the current code language.
Okay, thank you.
All right, folks, we are over time, so I just want to note that we do need to, before we take a vote on this, we need to at least state, do we have to vote on to extend the meeting, Todd? Or Todd, Stoyan?
Will be helpful.
Okay, so we do need to extend the meeting. Is this there's this one and one more on the list, and I do believe we need to wrap up today. So if we could get I would recommend that we go until 12:30. That gives us 22 minutes to complete this today. And I believe that will be an adequate amount of time. So could I get a motion for that to continue till 12:30?
So moved.
I second.
Thank you. Any additional discussion on that? Excellent. If there's any opposition to that motion, please say nay. Hearing none, we're going to extend our meeting until 12:30. And with that, we will move back to the proposal that we are currently discussing on lofts. And I would like to hear some additional discussion, but I will also entertain a motion on this proposal.
Just a quick question for you, John. In section 30 or 326.2, the last sentence reads the provisions of section 23, or excuse me, 326.3 through 326.5 shall not apply to lofts that do not comply with items 1 and 2. Are you referencing items 1 and 2 in section 326.2? And
Yeah.
maybe we should say that?
Well, it's part of this. It's part of the same section but if you feel that would be clearer, or we could say of this section, I guess, would be the other way to do that. but it's, you know,
Oh, this section works.
okay. So that would be, yeah, at the end of that sentence that's highlighted there. So, and I guess add of this section. I will say that at the national level, we were told to delete the sentence entirely. I think it's a good clarification, but that's fine. So of this section. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Would you like to make a motion, Annie?
Sure. So I move that we approve this with the amendments that were brought forth.
Okay, we have a motion for as modified. Approval as modified. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Damon. I'm gonna mute Ron there. All right, we have a motion and a second for approval as modified, or recommendation of approval as modified, I should clarify. All right, if there's any opposition to that motion, please say nay.
Nay.
Okay. The motion carries with one nay.
Micah, can we go a little bit more detailed here to clarify who supports?
Okay. Can I have a roll call vote then? Will that work for you, Storian?
Yes, sir. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Jen?
I support.
Okay. Quinn is not here. Ron?
Support.
Todd?
Do not support.
Okay. Michelle is not here. Annie?
Yes,
Oh,
I'm here.
yes. Sorry. Okay,
support.
welcome. Annie, support, right?
Yes, I support.
Okay, thank you. Darren?
In favor.
In favor. Okay. And okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Storian. All right, motion carries. Appreciate that, John. Thank you for your time. Thank you, Tag. All right, let's move on to the 043. And there are changes, Storian, if you want to show those proposals, I can discuss them really quick. I was not as heavily involved in it. However, I will go over what has changed.
Okay, I need to find, is it the last document that you sent me?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that depends. If I've sent you more since then, it could not be.
Okay, give me a second. Sorry about that.
That's all right. If you'd like, I could share my screen.
Okay, if you can.
I won't be able to edit as quickly as you will, though. But
Okay, let's. I found it, I think.
okay. If we need to edit. And then if you can make that bigger, be great. All right, so it did change from it was previously titled common accessory rooms or areas. Now it's titled shared accessory rooms or areas. And then the wording of the 302.3.2 has changed significantly. And it just talks about separation by the table, which the table is now included below, which that was not before. And then it points you for information on the openings, sends you to the appropriate section of the IRC, which is section 702.3.5. And then it moves into the next section and talks about the opening protection and gives some information there. It did modify some additional language we had in there and specified what we need for the opening protection. And then, of course, as I indicated, provides the table. Go ahead, John. You're going to help me out on this, I hope.
Not on the table, not on the substance. I do have a comment on the renumbering.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I see this did not get adjusted as we had suggested. The tag raised the question the last time about the numbering because there's existing 302.3.2 in the state code. The numbering should be R302.3.3 and R302.3.3.1 for those two sections. Adjust the table number accordingly. And the existing R303.3.3 should be renumbered to 3.4. So I can run over that. I mean, that's the very quick summary, and I can again just run that through you more slowly. So the first section should be R302.3.3. Just change the last 2 to 3. Yep, and keep the R3 at the beginning. Yep. And then the next section number the 2 again should change to 3. The table number can also get renumbered to 3.3, 302.3.3. And the assumption is that the next section, there's only one following section, and it's not in here, but that would get renumbered, which is R302.3. It would become R302.3.4. That's supporting construction.
Thank you, John. Just to go back up to the first section, Stoyan, if you would, once you're complete there. We also need to change the reference numbers to the table, change that from a 2 to a 3 at the end. And then the one above that as well. Perfect. Thank you, John, on the renumbering. I did not get that from Quinn, and he is out currently on vacation. All right, so again, this was a proposal, clarifying the shared accessory spaces and how those could or should be separated and provide some consistent guidance in the code for those. And I'll open the floor for discussion.
Dwayne, can you scroll up so we can actually see the content? Okay. So this looks like it's going to somewhat of a 1 hour separation between the dwelling unit and the shared accessory rooms. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, so that's above or below. They're looking at 5/8 inch type X. Stoyan, can you scroll down so we can see the bottom 2 boxes of that table? There we go.
This one for the Banner Road is a washer and dryer. They took the washer and dryer with them, so it's kind of a buyer beware.
Okay, so it's not. It's just the floor ceiling assembly that is quasi 1 hour, and the wall assembly is still only 1/2 inch. So my concerns remain the same. We don't know what's happening in that common space, unless it's more clarified. I have a little bit of a heartburn with this.
Okay, can understand that to some extent. I guess my question is, how are you treating these spaces currently, like a common laundry room or other spaces, Annie?
Well, I'm not in that world anymore.
Okay.
And I would, I don't know how they're treating it here locally.
Okay, thank you. And Damon, go ahead.
I'm on the road, so I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage. However, for clarification, I'm not driving, I'm a passenger. Can somebody give me a real world example of this type of situation?
All right, I guess that would be me. Again, I'm not as versed, maybe others can help. It's kind of like 2 units with a common laundry room that they could be accessed, you know, it's say the laundry room is large enough that it spans both units in the back, and both units have access from their unit. Currently, right now, there's no explanation of the separation between the common areas and that unit. And so this would address that issue. And that's really simple. And I'm sorry, Damon, you kind of broke up. You want to repeat that?
I said, now I'm tracking better. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, any other comments, questions, thoughts?
This is Todd. I think the last time this came up, we were somewhat concerned about the uses in there, and it was specifically brought up about it could be an area used for cooking. Maybe even somebody could have a barbecue or something in there, who knows? But for that purposes, it just seemed like maybe why would we reduce the separation required? And I think even one of the comments was why not just get the somewhat quasi 1 hour for everything.
Okay. Sorry, I need to go back and review. So are you indicating that you're supporting that, Todd? I guess I'm not sure where you're going with that. I'm trying to review the code at the same time.
I think that would be a type of proposal that I would be willing to approve. Yeah.
So your recommendation is you're wanting to limit what can be used in these commons areas, although there's no limit on that currently.
Well, no, maybe not limit, but just provide the 5/8 type X gypsum in all scenarios.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Sorry, oh, where's my table? Why am I not finding my table? And I apologize, I'm looking up another table and looking at the separation requirements. But I'm not finding it. I'm not fast enough.
What are the current separation requirements between the units?
You're talking about
This is only applicable to a duplex, right? A 2-family unit. So you could just mirror the separation requirements for between the 2 units. That would also give jurisdictions that have adopted sprinklers, it would get a reduction.
Sure, but we've talked about, I think, that same thing where now if you have a common space and you're providing the same separation as you do between the 2 units, you're actually doubling that that separation between the units if you're only separating the common area. And I'd have to draw that out to kind of show you. And John, do we have some of those in our meeting agenda from when we discussed this proposal? Some of the drawings we did? Do you know? Did I lose John? John left.
Well, wouldn't that make sense to do that though? Because you still have that risk of these other people on this other side of this wall. And you also have the increased risk of nobody is always in that space. kind of out of sight, out of mind. You know, people go in, put their laundry and leave. There's this, you know, there's a fire from the dryer. Nobody's really aware of it because it's not part of their dwelling, or, you know, it takes longer for them to become aware.
Okay. So I'm gonna hold a little drawing up, see if it picks it up. Not at all. That sucks. All right. We kind of discussed this, and I apologize. I don't have that answer. You're indicating, you know, if you've got the separation between the two units of the 1 hour, and you have, so now you're having a 1 hour that's part of the common area on each side. So technically have two 1 hour walls separating the common area from the other dwelling, from each dwelling unit, if that makes any sense. I wish I had more to explain to you. I'm not sure I'm explaining this concept very well at all for folks. But right now, I guess the question is, what is your separation requirement for your common area between your two dwelling units currently? And I'm hearing that there's none.
Yeah, I've never reviewed a project that had that, but I think I understand what you're saying. It's not that you have the separation on both sides of the accessory room. It's that it's like a double wall.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was the question. So this proposal is clarifying, when you have these common spaces, what that separation needs to be, because right now there's no indication in the code, or there's no requirement in the code on what that separation is supposed to be. And so that's what this does.
Because the double wall would be kind of overkill.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not understanding where you're talking the double wall. Back to your example where you had two units and a common laundry room at the back of those two units. Where's the double wall come in?
Well, if you're requiring the 5/8 all the way around, you would have a separation from the dwelling unit to the common area, and from the common area to the other dwelling unit. And that would be two 1 hour walls, which is more than is required.
But the hazard is in the common area, between the common area and the unit,
Then that's already protected,
with something less than 1 hour though.
and that's okay. Does that make sense that is okay per the code currently?
I don't agree with that. The hazard is still the hazard. You know, as Jen was saying, you don't know what's going on in that common space. And not having any protection between a resident in his unit and activity in a common space, I think is the problem.
So if your garage is that common space, you're still allowed the same 1/2-inch gypsum currently, if the garage is adjacent to and not below the habitable space.
But it's your own garage. It's not shared.
Could it be shared, or are you, I guess that's my question. You could have a garage that is common. I'm not sure what what's missing. Again, you could have a lower restriction with a garage than that's a common garage or common space. I mean, we're providing something here. I would assume that you'd want something. Now you don't want anything. That's what I'm asking is, how are you addressing this in the current code today?
And I'm not in the application to address it. I'm not a plans examiner at this point in time. In my past life, I would have required an hour separation.
Okay, and you would be, okay. Ron, did you have something to add?
Well, yeah, I know, like, I think the city of Bremerton now has some dwelling units where your neighbor's garage is actually under your dwelling unit, and they just use the regular garage separation. And what's the difference? I mean, this room is going to be a common space, and yeah, you don't know what goes on in your garage
all the time, so you wouldn't necessarily know what's going on in the common space. I think just the regular separation that you would use from a house to a garage should be sufficient.
Okay. And that is what this proposal is trying to do. And the table almost mirrors similar requirements for garage separation. So with that, it sounds like there are some concerns with this still. Is there any recommendations on how to improve this before we bring it to a motion? Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion for a recommendation. It can be for disapproval. But I do need a motion, please.
I'll move for disapproval.
Thank you, Annie. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, thanks, Todd. The motion on the table is for disapproval. Any additional discussion from the tag? Hearing none. All in, I should say, if there's any opposition to that motion, please say nay. All right, hearing none, motion carries. This item has been recommended for disapproval to the BFP committee. I appreciate the discussion on this one. I apologize that I didn't have better arguments. Again, I didn't work on this one as much. All right, we are through the items on the code change proposal list, as I can tell. And with that,
but I got distracted just as you were voting.
Okay.
I'm going to vote against the disapproval of that.
Okay.
Just note for the record.
Thank you, Ron. I appreciate that very much. And if Stoyan will note that for us in the minutes. All right. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, everyone. Is there any other business today?
Mike, I'm sorry. I want to finish with this proposal. I know John recommended changing the numbering, but I'm looking at 2021 residential code. I will move it here. I want to be sure I'm doing it right. So currently we have R302.3.1, and the initial proposal was to go with R302.3.2 and 302.3.3. So now when we are moving to, as it was suggested, 302.3.3, I don't see. So Micah, can you, or John, I think how it was originally proposed, it matched the numbering in 2021 IRC. So I got a little bit confused why we needed to change the numbers, the section numbers.
I'll have to go back and review it. It's all right, Stoyan. It was voted
Okay,
for
let's
disapproval, and we
move
will
back to
look
it.
at it and bring it back for BFP anyway.
Okay.
So with that, thanks, Stoyan. Thanks, everyone, for your time. I just want to verify if there's any other business. Stoyan, can you let us know the next steps, please?
Well, the next steps, we will have the BFP committee most likely next Wednesday. Unfortunately, I cannot schedule it right now because not all tags are done. So I will wait for the IBC tag on Wednesday, this Wednesday, before I decide to schedule the BFP committee for next Wednesday.
Okay.
And after the BFP committee, yes.
Yeah, what happened to that mechanical code proposal that was on the agenda today regarding kitchen hoods?
It never was on the agenda. It went to the mechanical code tag, and it was discussed times, I think.
Okay, I just, when I looked up the agenda that came out with today's meeting, it was still on there.
Because first it's a mistake. In second, even if we try not to make it, we post the agenda with the current proposals, and then we're trying to post it earlier in the game because many folks start complaining, oh, why we don't have the agenda. Well, we have it, but we also, when we modify documents, we post the documents on the website as well. So now you have conflicting information when you check the link on the agenda and when you check the documents on the website. I don't know how to make it better. I can't make our folks happy. You know, somebody is complaining about the agenda, others are complaining about the documents. I guess, I mean, if nobody likes it, I'm doing my job if nobody likes it.
Oh, no problem. That was the agenda that I was looking at, and I just wondered what happened to it. No problem. That's fine. I know you're doing a good job, and you've got a lot on your plate. So just keep it up.
This proposal had to be removed. For this particular proposal, it's a mistake. It should be removed like 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question,
Okay.
Ron.
Thank you.
All right. Any other business, folks? Next step will be the BFP committee. I do encourage the members of the public that have had their proposals listened to attend that meeting when it does come out. There's a chance for discussion of your items again, especially for those that have not been approved. That would be a time. You could also, I believe, provide some additional information or writing kind of a public comment to Stoyan as to why you believe that. If you can't attend the meeting, we will have that documented at least. So I do encourage further participation. And again, I think the TAG for their time and all the effort they put into it. I don't believe we have another meeting scheduled for some time unless we get directed to review something again. So I believe this would be
a final building.
I'm going to go ahead and mute Ron. I'm not he's talking to us. If he is, he can come back on. Story, correct me if I'm wrong. There's no further TAG meetings at this time.
Not until June 17. After the council meeting, we may need to schedule a few meetings. There were a few sections that needed some cleanup, and I never had the chance to work on them, but we can get back to these sections. Most of them are editorial, so it doesn't need special council or TAC approval.
Perfect. All right, everyone. With that, I will move to adjourn the meeting. I appreciate everybody's time. Again, we will talk to you soon. We will keep you posted on when the next TAG meetings will need to occur, if they do. Thank you for all the work.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you.
Okay,
Thank you.